republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is announcements and recognitions. And I would just like to say that I want to thank our new superintendent, Zach, for being with us and with our school district. We're off to a great start here, Zach, and I just want to thank you for your dedication, your hard work, and your commitment to our school district. So I just wanted to make that announcement. I think we're off to a great start. Zach has just done wonderful things so far for our school district, and hopefully will continue to do that. You better continue to do that. Anyway, that's my announcement for tonight. I don't know if any other board member has an announcement they would like to make. I know our sports are in full gear at the high school and at all of our schools, actually, middle school, elementary schools. Our play is underway for the fall, Oklahoma. So there's a lot of exciting things going on. So, okay, well, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the acceptance of minutes. And can we have a motion to accept the minutes of September 27th, 2022? Okay, Ann Walker, second.
Second.
Brian French. Welcome, Pip.
No, sorry. I actually have a point of discussion on the minutes.
Oh, okay, okay. You came just in time.
Right on. Dramatic entry.
Yes, a dramatic entrance from Pip.
It was just where we added, or we created the ad hoc committee on redistricting.
Yes.
And I noticed there was no statement of purpose for that committee, and I thought that that would be a helpful thing to clarify.
Yep.
Because there was a little discussion about it, and I think that's important at this stage.
Yeah, great. So we would add that it's basically a informational gathering committee at this time. Is that
Right. I think we
that?
said specifically to determine whether redistricting would be necessary next year.
For the
Okay.
start
It's
of
for-
next school
Yeah,
year.
specifically for the fall of 23.
23, correct.
And so, yeah, is there an immediate need to move in that direction in consideration of that, or can we wait a little bit longer? So.
Okay. So we'll ask Paulette to make that change to the minutes. And who seconded the motion?
Brian.
Brian, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Next, we have presentations. Do you
Public
want-
comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to make a public comment in front of our board? You have 3 minutes to speak. We need your name and address. Anyone? Do we have anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment?
Nope.
No, nobody, Matt? Okay, thank you. All right, we will close the public comment session. Now we have the presentations. Okay, Zach, do you want to introduce this?
Well, I would just say that we have a group of high school students who have been working through NAMI training and are here to speak to the board, walk the board through some of that training. So it's always exciting to have students involved in the process of educating us about what it is that we need to be doing. So happy to turn it over to them and have them educate us.
All right. Hello. Thank you for having myself and these students this evening. My name is Eileen Marusik, and I'm the outreach counselor here at Portsmouth High School. Last year, I'd applied for a grant from the Foundation for Seacoast Health to support a program called the NAMI New Hampshire Connect Suicide Prevention Youth Leader Training Program. Very lengthy name. We had 22 high school students who were selected to participate, along with 17 staff members who volunteered. We spent the day training with Ann Douglas from NAMI. And after this training, the participants were then equipped to train other students and members of our community. The idea behind this training is that friends of youth at risk are typically the ones who see warning signs or know that a friend is suicidal before adults are even aware. Because youth may not know what to do about a friend at risk or feel obligated to keep a suicidal plan a secret, it's important for youth to understand what their role is and in recognizing a friend at risk and seeking out an adult for help. This is a modified gatekeeper model, and these 8 students in front of you are trained as youth leaders. This is an exciting opportunity for you to see the hard work from these students and the strength of this program. We've already trained the Captains Club last year at the high school, and we have a goal of training several other populations within our community and school. I'm honored to work alongside this group of young leaders and their willingness and capability of approaching complex issues that young people face. And I will now hand it over to the students.
I'm sharing a screen. I've never done this before. All right. Looks like I've done it. Okay, great. So we want to thank you guys so much for hearing us today and hearing our presentation. We're going to start with a few introductions. So my name is Alice. I'm a senior at Portsmouth High School, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Sophia. I'm a sophomore, and I use she, her pronouns. My name's Evie. I'm a sophomore, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name's Ava. I'm a senior, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name's Alicia. I'm a senior and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Leah. I'm a sophomore, and I use she, they pronouns.
My name is Bray. I'm a senior and I use they, them pronouns.
My name is Declan. I am a junior and I use he, him pronouns.
So as Eileen explained to y'all, we were trained through the NAMI Youth Suicide and Prevention Training, and we're here now to pass on kind of a shortened version of everything that we learned in 6 hours. And our general goal here is to help y'all best communicate with your children, coworkers, family members, peers, etc. Thank you.
We will also be giving you some warning signs and helpful tips to look for in your day-to-day life. This is a participatory meeting, so we definitely appreciate it if you ask questions and provided feedback. And we're just here to provide information as to how y'all can create a more cohesive community. We are going to give a trigger warning for this discussion for suicide, suicidal ideation, and mentions of self-harm. If these are sensitive topics to you, please take space at your discretion.
Can you put the microphone down a little bit so we can hear better? Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
So why are you guys here? You guys are here because you are leaders in our community, and hopefully you care about your students and the safety that we have.
Your input is valuable to our growth. You are in charge of policies in our school. Your children are our peers and fellow students. You are a citizen of Portsmouth, and you are valuable to all of us here.
You are people, or people you love may need help or skills to better identify the warning signs of suicidal ideations.
And you care for your community.
Oh, I went too far. Oh no. Okay. What will you learn? How to identify what suicidal ideation may look like. Suicidal ideation is thoughts or feelings of wanting to end one's life or a sense of not wanting to be in a general sense here.
You will learn how to identify how you can help inform others about mental health.
You will also learn how to find safe ways to aid your children, coworkers, peers, and community.
And how to gain more appreciation for our community and our community as a whole.
Okay, so we're now going to do like an interactive activity, and we're going to talk about why the topic of suicide is avoided in everyday conversations and any stigmas that may be around suicide in general or just mental health. And we're going to pass out candy because it seemed to work well with the students, so we're going to do it here too. So an example may be embarrassment as to why someone doesn't want to talk about it. So we want to hear what you guys think.
Judgment or like it's a moral failure. I didn't get a choice. I would like a choice.
Okay.
I'll spin off the moral with Carrie and say that sometimes it can be against religion as well. Thank you.
I think there's a fear of being ostracized or feeling shame for expressing different opinions, thoughts.
I think besides a moral failure, it can feel like just failure at life.
I think there's also a fear of being overwhelmed with unhelpful support and just more and more and more when you're already feeling overwhelmed. Thank you.
Or fear of like treatment or punishment too with that.
I would say that I think a lot of people think that they can handle it themselves, do not need to share out.
I also think our society in general avoids talking honestly about emotions. Thank you.
And I think people sometimes think of it as not a real medical problem because it's in their head. Thank you.
I would tag off that and say I think we are not in a place yet where we consider mental health on the same level as physical health. Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Sometimes the kids think they're the only one, and nobody else would have a clue what they're talking about and wouldn't. Thank you. You're welcome.
Helplessness, kids feel totally helpless. They feel like there's no way to no place to turn to, so they consider ending their life.
I think people in general care too much about what other people think versus addressing their own inner feelings. Thanks.
And the fear of what if this is temporary and I'm drawing all this attention to myself and now I'll forever have this identity.
I think a lot of what we're talking about is from the perspective of someone who might be thinking in this way, but it's also, the topic's not just avoided by those people, it's avoided by parents, leaders in churches, school leaders, because sometimes people are not sure what to do to help.
And I would add to that it's just scary.
It's
scary for anybody to think about.
Or also not even what to do to help, but what supports or help are there. I want the most.
I also think there's an element of denial. This isn't happening. This doesn't happen here. This doesn't happen to my family, my friends. It's not. And we cover our eyes and our ears and our mouths, and we just don't want to address it. Thank you.
So in the second question, what can we do to break the stigma? I think we can do things like this, right? Bring awareness, have the conversations, let other people know that it's not so uncommon.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think we need to normalize the language that surrounds it and make it part of dinner table conversation, lunch table conversation, conversation before and after games. It needs to be part of our everyday fabric of communication.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about it just like we talk about like physical health. Like taking care of your brain and your body should be the same thing.
I also think it can be hard to talk about because there's plenty of us that have had friends and family that have committed suicide, and so it can be a sad topic, or triggering, should I say, too. Thank you.
We're going to give all your candy away on the first question.
Great.
That was really good. So a lot of that was just kind of to show us like all these preconceived notions that we have about suicide and talking about suicide and how those can be harmful. We look at a lot of these and we can tell immediately that they're not true, such as judgment from others. A lot of times others are here to help, and so we're not really going to face the judgment that we feel we're going to face. And so that's something that's really important to consider when we're talking about it. The stigma is exactly what it sounds like. It's made up. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is correct terminology, which we find really important. So there are some More correct things to say regarding suicide. So you may describe a tragic situation as the person died by suicide rather than the person committed suicide. This distinction is important because it avoids victim blaming, thus focusing on the person rather than the action itself. Furthermore, words similar to committed, successful suggest almost criminal intent and place an unnecessary amount of stigma upon the individual. So the use of correct terminology ensures total respect for everybody, no matter if they may have feelings of suicide intent or ideation themselves, or if they know somebody that has. And furthermore, while suicide is less commonly spoken in its literal form, you may hear often teenagers use terms such as, "I want to kill myself." It is highly advised that everyone discourage others from using this harmful language and seek aid or provide explanation to why this is harmful. These phrases may be interpreted as disrespectful by those who have tried to commit suicide, end their life, or have had loved ones who have tried to end their lives as well. It is also important to remember that somebody that may be saying these words may or may not have this intent, and so it makes it really difficult to decipher who and who does not need help. So when in doubt, it's always best to proceed with caution and to use correct terminology because we never know what somebody's background could be.
We're now going to take a few minutes to watch a video about a man named Kevin Hines who attempted to take their own life some years ago. He explains the importance of showing that you care.
You know, I've gone through a lot in my life, and the struggles continue every day. But what brought me, in my opinion, to the Golden Gate Bridge on September 25th, 2000, it wasn't because of a death in the family. It wasn't because of a breakup with my most recent girlfriend, both of which had just happened. People say, you know, the person died by suicide because their girlfriend broke up with them, because they lost their job, because they lost a family member. That's not how it works. I was at the Golden Gate Bridge in so much mental, emotional, and physical pain because of my brain disease bipolar disorder. I could see no other option. I never wanted to die. I believed I had to. I believed there wasn't a shadow of doubt in my mind that I had no other course to take. So I went to that bridge. My father thought I was at school at City College. After dropping me off there that morning, after trying to reach me and saying, "Kevin, why don't you come to work with me today? Come to the movies, we'll go to the beach." And I lied to my dad because I was so content with the fact that I had to die because of the voices in my head and the pain I was experiencing. That's the common denominator of suicidal people. An epic amount of pain that you can't describe to anyone, and you think no one will understand, and you think you're alone. I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by a sea of people, but I thought I was an island. And I thought nobody else understood this. Nobody empathized with it. I was brought to that bridge because of my brain. And I remember going over that rail. I remember having an instant regret. 36 people have survived that fall. Of the well over 2,000 that have died, that's a 2% survival rate. Less than 5 have regained full mobility. I'm one of those 5. The climate of our nation, as it relates to brain health and mental and behavioral health, is at a precipice of change. More people than ever before are reporting on suicide prevention matters and mental health in America. In that same token, more people are inaccurately reporting it. So it's a time now when state by state has to step it up for that training to occur, and hell, to mandate that change. Even for the people who say, "I don't want to do that. I know suicide prevention. I know how to take care of someone who's mentally unstable." No, you don't. because you haven't learned the tools, tips, and programs that actually are proven to save lives, to lower costs, and to help people heal. Because we're never going to change a generation until the generations that are coming up know what to look for and how to get that person to safety before the suicide attempt occurs, before the mental breakdown happens. And when we get that training in place on a national basis, and it's mandatory, you will see someone be able to represent for a loved one and know that they've done the right thing no matter the outcome. I'm grateful to be anywhere, anytime. I mean that. I'm still going through it. That's okay, because I get to be here. And I'll deal with that for the rest of my life, because it's a disease that's chronic, and there are no cures. Until and when that happens, I work tirelessly to stay alive. I have chronic suicidal thoughts. They're not going to kill me, though. They'll never kill me. I have too much of a support network for them to kill me. Are you okay? Is something...
Yay. Well, let's not look at what it's called. Anyways. Next, we're going to be talking about who is at risk. So, generally, most people assume people who struggle with suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, or acts are only depressed people, generally children, generally women, the loner types, the artsy kids, the kids who don't really express themselves, the ones who wear the dark clothes or like don't try or just generally fail in school. And it's really important to know that that is not true at all. Anyone can struggle, and it doesn't really discriminate because it is a mental health issue. It's a mental health crisis. So whether a person is athletic, artistic, or a girl or a boy or trans or anything in between, it doesn't matter what they are labeled as because the signs don't lie. Just because a student is top of the class or an athlete or someone heavily involved in their community, it doesn't mean that there isn't something going on. So the more we erase the stigma, the better we can help.
So now we're going to talk about the different warning signs you can look for and just delve deeper into how those differ from person to person. And again, feel free to step out if you need to, and please ask questions.
All right, so one example of a warning sign would be dramatic mood changes. So if your child is happy all the time, they're always out with their friends or whatever, and suddenly they start staying in their room, or it's clear that they're not happy, that's a warning sign to look out for. If your child is clear that they're seeing no reason for living or having no sense of purpose in life, or acting recklessly or engaging in risky activities without thinking, not so much doing something because they expect they'll be fine and they I just feel invincible, but just because they actually don't care about the outcome. So crossing traffic and not actually caring if they get hit.
An increase or beginning substance use, withdrawing from friends, family, and others, increased isolation, like always staying in the room, or less interest in going out with friends, being able to sleep or sleeping all the time.
It could be feeling anxious or agitated, something that may not have set off your child before may irritate them now. Dramatic changes in their friends, difficulties at school or work, consistently poor grades, or having a hard time completing assignments.
You may notice that they neglect their appearance or hygiene, so this might be a decrease in basic self-care, such as showering, brushing your teeth or hair, but it also might be something a little bit less obvious. Perhaps they used to put a lot of effort into their appearance, and now they go to school or work wearing pajamas and not seeming to care as much. Furthermore, dropping out of activities, and then a sudden improvement in mood after being down or withdrawn. So this can indicate that the individual has made plans to end their life, or that they've made peace that the end of their life is soon.
Sudden calm or peace after a period of intense conflict or emotions, giving away some of their favorite possessions, or feeling hopeless and helpless.
They could also be feeling rage or uncontrollable anger, or possibly seeking revenge for even minor indiscretions, like somebody accidentally bumping into them in the hallway. They may be feeling trapped, like there is no way out. Yeah. When speaking about supporting those with suicidal ideation, the analogy of quicksand is often used. This is to say that if an individual experiencing suicidal ideation is stuck in quicksand, the best thing for you to do as a support system is to help them find help. Otherwise, you may become too involved, thus falling into quicksand yourself. There are several ways that you can help these individuals that's outside of just listening.
When speaking to students who have expressed suicidal ideations, remain calm in body and tone. Support the child by going with them to seek help.
We encourage students to talk to teachers, adults, Officer Lynn, guidance counselor, or call 911 if in immediate danger or crisis. You shouldn't be the only one that knows someone is in crisis. There's strength in numbers.
If you are struggling or worry for a loved one or coworker's safety, you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is listed up here, or our local Seacoast Mental Health Hotline, also listed right there. A trusted person that can watch over the person dealing with this is very helpful, or even contacting a local hospital for recommended advice or aid. Adults and teens equally struggle, and it's really important to remember that the pain a person faces doesn't discriminate, and that you should take what they say seriously.
Also, if you're feeling concerned about your child or another child or a loved one, make sure to talk to a trained professional like a healthcare provider or a mental health professional or a doctor. When you talk to them, make sure not to underplay what you know. Only share the facts that you were told, and don't play it off as a phase or your child being dramatic. Make sure the professional knows everything that your child told you, because their mental health is important, so it is important that they get the help they need when they need it.
And especially do not leave them alone. If you're in a situation where you're concerned for a person's health, even if they assure you that they will be all right, please do not leave them alone. Share your concerns with them and be transparent about why you have these concerns for them, and that you love them and that you want to help them get the help they need so they can get help and just get better. And make sure that you call everyone you need to and just get them the help they need. It's better to be overreactive than underreactive in these situations.
So at this point, that kind of marks the end of our presentation. Again, that was a brief summary of everything that we learned in 6 hours. But we are here to accept any questions. We'll answer them to the best of our ability, or direct you somewhere where they might have better answers than us. So, yeah.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. We certainly appreciate all of you coming out tonight. We know you all have a lot of homework to do and stuff, and here you are educating the school board. But we'll open it up now, if people will raise their hands. Pip.
Thanks. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for being involved with this and bringing it to us. It's really important that we're all trained, and I really appreciate the way you were able to fit this all in so quickly, because you gave us a lot of information. I had one question that came up. I think somebody just recently said, only share the facts that you were told. And I think that meant from the person who was at risk. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that and why that's important. Thanks.
So this is important just because A lot of times when adults are reporting on a child, especially if they are expressing thoughts of suicidal ideation, it's really important to say only what they told you, not necessarily what you are assuming they mean by what they say, because sometimes we can assume wrong, mistakes happen, and that can be a huge difference in the care that they receive. So it's really important that you make no assumptions about what the emotions they're conveying to you are, and you just kind of say, the child conveyed to me that they are feeling this way and that they would like to receive this type of help, or whatever that line of conversation or dialogue may be. And afterwards you could say, I feel that this is what is needed, but just to make sure that you make the distinction between what you think is best versus what the person has conveyed to you is really important in how they get their treatment and care.
Got it. Thank you.
Carrie.
Thank you guys all for volunteering and doing this work, and it's so amazing. I think I work in healthcare, and so just thinking about sort of the burden too, like I'm assuming that probably in serving in this role, then people come to you with questions, come to you with concerns about friends and things like that. And I'm just curious kind of what support you have for one another or within your group, and how you do self-care as well as care for others' emotional needs.
I love that question. I do think that's really important because it's true. While we are here trying to help and educate others, it's really important to take time for ourselves. And I can say, I'm not sure if I can really speak on the behalf of the entire group, that can be really difficult as we're balancing everything in our lives. But we do have Eiley, who's great. Shout out to Eiley, as usual. And also each other. Of course, as an individual, I am trained, but I also know that all of my friends behind me are trained, and I can speak to any of them if I am in crisis. We kind of work as a web rather than just kind of one straight line.
Liz.
I also want to reiterate what everybody had said, that I'm like so happy to see you all here and all together doing this. And so I guess I was trying to get a better idea, or I was hoping they could provide the board an understanding a little bit more about what this looks like. I know you mentioned 2217 and a modified gatekeeper approach, and that you all have trained the Captain's Club, but how often do you meet? Is this your entire group? And then how does your training sort of play out on a, so far this year, I guess, to others?
So this is definitely not the entire group. I want to say about 20 of us in the, 20 students in the original training, and a couple teachers as well. And I guess our hopes are just to train as many people as we can and get all these resources and information out there to as many people as possible. What was the other part of your question?
I guess I was curious, how you're doing that. So you all are meeting on a weekly basis or regular basis, and is it simply going around the school at the lunch hour and talking to people, or what is your model as far as sharing out information further?
Yeah, so for this specifically, we meet whenever needed. So before this, we met for a couple weeks every week just to get prepared for this. We also convey a lot of this information through our wellness club, which Alice and I are co-presidents of, and we use a lot of this information within that club and during the events we put on, just getting it out there. The handouts we handed out to you, we've had those at a lot of our tables, so a lot of students and teachers and parents and staff have taken those and have that information. And yeah, wellness club is definitely our biggest export with that.
I'll chime in on the second half of that. The goal is also, within time to start training other populations. And so obviously I'm on a little bit of a timeout coming up here soon, but when I come back, the goal is we've talked about reaching out to the drama department, because we've already done the athletic department, and then maybe reaching out to freshmen and sophomores that are incoming. And so slowly but surely trying to build up that population of all folks who have been trained as well.
All right, thank you.
I think I saw Hope, Brian, Zach, and then Margot.
And Nick.
Oh, Nick.
So I have just a few questions, but I want to say kudos to all of you for, your time and your energy, and not just taking the training, but then taking it and pouring out that knowledge onto other people within our community. That shows a lot of maturity, I think, in leadership, especially around mental health. And I hope that that can spread within our district. So thank you. I'm curious, based on reporting, because I know it is kind of based on the data numbers, what % of teens currently have suicide ideation? And then I'm also interested in, I know this was like just a snippet of your training, but so if you hold a full training, how long is that training? And then if someone wanted to be trained, how would they find out about more trainings from you?
Yeah, so I don't have the specific numbers off the top of my head. In 2021, last fall, we conducted the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which will give us those numbers. It's taking a year to get that data back, so hopefully we get it back relatively soon, which will help kind of, and that's something Patty and I have been working on, give us some of those numbers. And then, what was the second part of your
I was
question?
just curious if people wanted to get trained, how long would an actual training take and how would they find out about those? And what's been the kind of feedback you're getting from students or maybe even teachers? Because you said you had some teachers, so are you looking to train other teachers, or would those teachers that got train other teachers?
Yeah, so the teachers are required by law to receive like a suicide prevention training regardless. That's something that's set up by Zach and Patty, and so they get that separately. The goal is, we've talked about having maybe these students train some of the newer teachers come in. This is really more of like a train the trainer model, and really to kind of, again, get the word out to other youth about how to get an adult involved. And so I like to emphasize that it's not their role to be doing any sort of crisis work. It's their role, if they feel comfortable, bringing a friend down to the guidance department or going to Officer Lynn. And so I hope that like somewhat answered your question a little bit.
Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, I think, students in front of us, I mean, this is really a source of pride at Portsmouth. I mean, tackling such a mature and tough subject. So, thank you for tackling it. I am curious from the student's perspective, what has been like the feedback or the response with this student training that you guys had done? Like, how did that go?
Right, so it can be pretty difficult to, I'm a little bit taller than my friends here, speak to students about this. They are our peers, our friends, our classmates. We do group projects with them, present in front of them. So in seeing them in this light is a little bit more difficult. The first training that we did was certainly rocky, as the first training of anything would go. But we expect that as we feel more confident talking about it, and as the group becomes more acclimated, the group of Portsmouth High School students in whole, of course, becomes more acclimated to discussing these sensitive topics, that they start to become easier and more natural conversations over time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just curious. Yep, thank you.
I think Margot
Nick
is
was
next.
ahead of me.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah, so first off, a small one. I seem to recall there being a change to, like, a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to make it 988. Is this one different, or is that...
Yeah, so 988 is a text hotline. It's a crisis line. Generally, we've found that it's not as helpful in providing conductive care for mental health crisis as the suicide hotline would be, or even Seacoast Mental Health's emergency line, just because their first step is sending police and emergency services. While that can be helpful in some situations, if it's not at a point of physical harm or danger, we find that it's not as helpful for that to be the first step rather than talking and their therapeutic type of aid.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Margot.
Yes, thank you very much. I really love the train the trainee model, or train the trainer model, and I think you were exceptionally eloquent in your presentation and informative. So I love when our high school students show off their talents, and on a topic like this, even more appreciative, and I hope our public eventually watches it. I have several questions. My first is, how far back do you think we need to go in terms of our age groups here on these trainings and on raising awareness from your personal experiences in here?
Right. So the the training, the education really needs to start at a very young age. Clearly, you're not going to go up to young elementary schoolers and talk to them about such a heavy concept in such a stark manner, but you can begin the process of educational, like emotional content very early. So that might even look like, what do emotions look like, how to identify them. Can you feel more than one emotion at once? What is an instance in which you might feel one emotion rather than the other, and is it normal and is it healthy? How to deal with your emotions. That can start before elementary school even. So then as they progress through the grades, they can learn more correct terminology rather than learning it through, unfortunately, a lot of people learned it through social media. And learning how to deal with it, how to deal with hearing about it, how to deal with feeling those emotions themselves, so that hopefully by the time they get to high school, they're able to have these open conversations with their peers where we're training them on these sorts of topics and discussing this heavy information with them. But if we never explain to them what a feeling is when they're 6 years old, it's really hard to explain how these feelings affect and possibly end people's lives when they're 16.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. So I guess my follow-up to that is, what can we do as a board and as a school department to help you build that support, increase proficiency, and normalize it? I imagine it's an incredible burden on all of you to take on the training, and it's, as you mentioned, these are your peers that you're presenting with. There's a vulnerability that makes the model effective. And I'm wondering, do we need to take a look at our orientations? Do we need to look at our success block in the middle school? Where can we build in the backdrop of support so that together we can roll out that normalcy and proficiency?
That was a really good question. I definitely think that, like you mentioned, inputting it within the success block at the middle school is a really good idea. We tried to do something like that last year. Timing didn't really work out, so we're hoping to do it this year or next year. And just, I guess, as a school board, just implementing more policies that can help with this kind of training and making sure that all of these resources are available to anybody who may need it. And then as parents and part of the community, making sure you have this open conversation with your children and making sure they know that whatever feelings they're feeling, it is okay. And just, if they need help, it's okay to ask for it.
I also think it's really important that you brought up orientations, because definitely freshman orientation is a fantastic time for one of these trainings to possibly occur, or to even have a modified one, just so they have a basic understanding going into high school, and it kind of lays the groundwork for the resources that they know that they can have in the future, and also lays the groundwork for us to kind of continue our program, to continue teaching, and to continue aiding in our community.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Zach.
No, mine's a little bit of a repeat, I think. First, I always find that student leaders do a great job of pulling the adults along to where we need to be very often. So I appreciate the work that you've done and your ability to articulate your learning to us in terms of hopefully creating some change. So my question is, and you may have already hit it in some of your responses to challenges with peers or things that are at lower grade levels, but I'm curious, at the high school, you take all this deep knowledge and everything that you've learned, what do you feel like is the biggest obstacle to creating a safer environment at PHS at this point?
I may be speaking just for myself, and so I'd like to welcome my peers up to, add anything that I may have missed. But often when we speak about these subjects, people become visibly uncomfortable, almost, or not necessarily almost, like actually to the point of laughter. And I understand this. I understand where they're coming from. We could all choose to take this as an insult, but it's a difficult conversation to have. And so because they're not aware that these are necessary conversations from such a young age, now that they're starting to hear about them, they become uncomfortable, which makes sense. This is obviously a very difficult conversation to have, especially with people that you are equals with. So as we're preaching this to our friends and the other students in the school, it becomes really difficult for them to quite grasp the severity of the issue, which I think in turn to us can sometimes feel almost hurtful, but it's not. It's just that we don't quite, we're not all on the same page here. They might not understand that we find this issue so severe in our community because we're trained to look out for it. And meanwhile, we don't understand that they might not find the issue as pertinent because they are not trained to look out for it. So it's kind of like a nice dichotomy, a split there of like where students are with understanding.
I have a couple of questions.
I just wanna add
Oh,
on to
go
it
ahead.
quickly.
I'm sorry.
I definitely, this is something I've seen a lot. So I may say I bring up like, oh, I've been really struggling to get a lot of sleep, and I've just been not okay. It very easily can turn into a competition of who got the least amount of sleep, which I see almost every day, and that can definitely be detrimental in an open conversation about this kinds of things and making sure people know that it, like, if you're not getting enough sleep and it's like repetitive, that may be an issue. And that's just like getting rid of that competition within students and our PHS community can definitely be something we can work on, and just letting people know that like not getting enough sleep's not usually a good thing.
I just want to quickly add on, large groups can be hard to tackle at once as well, because when you put a bunch of high schoolers or our peers into one room, often it can cause tension almost within the room and, like she said, uncomfortable in the room, and it causes jokes to be brought up and side conversations to be brought up. So I'd say large groups as a whole can create problems, so breaking them down into smaller groups and talking to people more one-on-one is really helpful.
And I'm sure you guys appreciate that that's true even for us. A smaller group of whether it's students or adults, it's easier to have a real conversation with than auditorium at PHS and trying to have it, whether that's a conversation about athletics or about anything. It can be really challenging. So.
I just have a question about the grant. Will the grant continue, or is it a one-time only, or?
So it's a one-time only grant, and ideally down the line, I would apply for it once. So the youngest I have here is sophomores, when those sophomores graduate. So.
And have you seen an increase in depression? And I am sure you have, since COVID has occurred in our life. Do you feel that this is more of a pressing need because of COVID and the effect it's had on teens?
I can say without a doubt, absolutely. That's had a large portion of it. And I also think COVID has created some resiliency as well in these young adults too. So I don't want it to seem like they're showing up every day and there's increased depression. While that may be true, and they're also coming to school every day and they're excited, but I do think this is an issue that we have to tackle as well.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Lisa.
I think most of my questions were asked. I did want to just share one piece of really good news for you all. Maybe you already know this, but one of the single biggest protective factors against suicide is a supportive school environment. And having just one person in the school building that people feel like they can turn to, which most definitely would include all of you. So on top of just being so fabulous and talking to all of us here tonight, which I know is not easy, you have to know that people just knowing that you're out there makes a difference. And I mean, the statistics are terrible during COVID. Like the proportion of high school students having suicidal thoughts went up by about 45% just last year from the year before. I mean, and the protective effect of having you all available to your peers is huge. I think my one question is if any of you have thoughts on what we do well right now in supporting kids once they do come forward expressing concerns about having thoughts that are really disturbing, how do we do a good job of supporting them, and if you think there's anything that we can do better where you might need more resources or help.
Speaking from personal experience anyways, I know that coming forward to the adults that we do have available in the high school community it's a really nice experience. They're very good at making us feel very comfortable and safe when talking about what we're struggling with, which has been an amazing thing. I mean, our guidance counselors and our support staff are trained very well, and they do a very good job at what they do. I think just having more of them might be helpful, or even just giving them more time to be able to have those one-on-one conversations with students who might be struggling, or have more chances to kind of meet with students to check in if they notice, hey, this student, I've noticed their grades are dropping and they're not usually like that. Maybe I should schedule a meeting with them to just check in. I think giving them more opportunity for those types of things would increase our support system tenfold.
I will say that my first block class is in the library. When it gets a little noisy in there, I spend the first block on my computer in guidance just so I have a quiet place to work. And students are pretty much flooding down the entire time wanting to talk to Eiley, which is great because Eiley's fantastic, very popular. Congratulations, Eiley. But at the same time, there's always a line of about 4 students sitting there with me as I'm working on a college application or my psychology course, who are left sitting alone in this room without any support. And so Eiley's great. We love her, and we sometimes joke around that we need more than one of her. Unfortunately, we can't clone her, but that would be the best case scenario.
Liz.
I just wanted to provide some clarity. In the work I do deal with some of these phone numbers, and so I just wanted to provide clarity that the National Suicide Hotline, that first number, was actually, because I know Nick had asked this question, so I wanted to clarify that that number has been consolidated to 988 as of July, and so that number can not only be texted, but it can also be called. And you will get somebody on the other end. As far as the Seacoast Mental Health Emergency Line, that's actually New Hampshire's rapid response line, and so that can provide more services like New Hampshire has mobile crisis teams, which will come out, local resources and services specific to New Hampshire. So the 988 is the new, the 1-800-273-8255, that song that we all love is now that 988 number, and then the New Hampshire Rapid Response. I can't say enough about the mobile crisis team, so so I just want to provide clarity and for you all to know that those resources are out there as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Carrie and Danielle.
One quick question for Eiley. Sorry to put you on the spot. I just remember from our budget conversations last year talking about, do you still serve 2 roles in substance use and...
I do, and it's probably not like the best conversation for this situation, but yes, I do serve 2 roles as the outreach and the SAP as well. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Danielle.
I just have a quick question about if another group of teachers or another group of students or wanted to have a training with you guys, is there a formal way to request that if we had a larger group that were interested?
There's no formal way. I would say contact Eiley. She is in charge of our group and she coordinates all of our trainings. Definitely contact Eiley. You can also, Alice. You can also contact Alice. She and Eiley are they work very well together and communicate really well. And then you can't get in touch with either of them. The
and
principal,
then you guys would possibly coordinate how that would happen and decide who and where and when, and maybe come meet with a group of kids.
So as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot more in our overall group, so we may pull some of them if they feel comfortable doing it. I'm sure a lot of us would be happy to repeat a training with another group, but there are more people we can talk to. The other teachers who did the training, they can come teach or train. If the teachers don't want to be talked to by students, that's completely fair. So yeah, contact Eiley.
No, it's not. We want to be trained by you. Right, and I think my role is to speak on behalf of the teachers. So,
Okay.
Great.
Any other questions? I think we're all set. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Okay.
We're on time.
Yes. Okay, we will move on our agenda. Thank you again, students. Go home and do your homework. Okay, we're off to the superintendent's report.
So I'll keep it pretty brief. I did want to get back to the question around the expectation that high schools in a district all have a student rep on the board. And there was a question about whether or not Lister Academy qualified as such. And so in terms of the question, and then we talked about there's a question of what do you want to do and what do you have to do? And so this is not, both through the conversations that Nancy has had with the New Hampshire School Boards Association and just some additional follow-up, including Jeanette Souther, our Pupil Support Services Director. Lister is very definitely not a high school. It is a program of PHS. And so it doesn't meet the qualifications of the need where you would have to have a Lister student as a student rep. But of course, you always can. But that's my understanding. I don't know. I think we had that from multiple, we had many different sources that confirmed that for us. So.
Good. Thank you for getting back to us on that.
You're welcome.
So, kind of just to clarify though, it technically, because it's a program, it falls under the high school, so it's a program of Portsmouth High School?
That's right, that's correct.
Okay, so moving forward, if there's ever questions about anything, then.
Yeah, if people get and at the moment, one of the things too is that, there are IEPs connected with that program too. So that was one of the challenges. One of the things that Jeanette wanted to make sure was really clear too is that it's important for people to realize that there's a special ed component to that program as well. And that would put some of our, there's some potential regulatory / funding issues that if we were to move to becoming an independent program that was an independent school that was not part of PHS, there's layers of a ripple effect that would have impacts on our ability to continue to provide programming in the same way. So there's layers to it.
Okay.
Carrie.
I think Nick had brought this up before and just want to, so there was this conversation, but also just the idea that we have one student rep who then graduates and then there's not that continuity. So I don't know where it should be addressed, but I would be fully supportive of adding a student rep at a different, I think you talked about like lower than a senior or sophomore year or something like that.
Stagger it,
just to be able to stagger it, but also adding Lister representation as well. So I think there's kind of two issues that have come up at different times that maybe we can, I don't know where that falls though. Policy?
We don't, just to speak from the policy, there's not there is a city council policy on why we have a student rep. It is not a school board policy, and that all the policy states is that we need a student rep. So if we would like to propose to amend or make some adjustments to that in terms of having one underclassman, one upperclassman, so that there's consistency, a more formal application process, those are all things that we could consider and propose. But it would go before, we would be proposing that to the city because it's their ownership of the policy, not ours.
And it's actually in the city charter.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Interesting.
I guess we can put it on as an item for the future agenda.
Nick has his hand up.
Well,
Okay,
given
Nick.
that it doesn't contradict the school or the city council policy for us to add an additional school board representative representing Lister Academy, would it be necessary to put it before the city council, or would we be able to make it our own
I believe
policy?
so, because it's in the city charter. And if we make a change to what's in the city charter, it has to go through the city council. That would be my opinion. Now, I don't know if that's correct.
So I'm not going to challenge somebody who's been on the city council around, and I just showed up 5 minutes ago. So, but I think, like, in terms of, I don't believe, like, the teacher rep is not part of the charter.
Right.
That's just a decision a board made at some point, and I I don't know that we even have policy around it. I think it was just a decision, maybe there is. So I don't know that if we were to expand, I think we're living up to the charter by having a singular student. I don't know that we would be in conflict with the charter if we were to expand to a second student. But again, you've been doing this longer than me.
We can get a legal opinion on that. We can talk to Kathleen.
Sounds good.
See what she says. But we can, if my suggestion would be that we do this at a future, put it on as a future agenda item, and we can discuss it. We can get more information and discuss it more fully.
Sounds like a
How does
good
that
plan.
sound to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, we'll do that.
Great idea.
Okay, next we have the policy committee minutes, September 21st, 2022.
I'm sorry, are we finished with the superintendent report?
Well, that's in the superintendent
Oh,
report.
okay. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Do you want to talk about that? Or?
I don't know if I'm going to walk through the
Margot?
minutes. I don't know if.
Okay, did everybody get a chance to read them?
We'll touch base on them when we get
When
to
we get to
policy.
the
I think it
policy.
makes sense when we get to the policy.
Okay.
piece.
Okay, we will move on. Thank you. We'll move on to the administrative report.
Well, I had a question.
Oh,
So
okay.
I just was wondering, there was a little bit of, it seems some confusion around some elementary communication around some of the GSA lessons or seal blocks or whatever you want to call them. And I was just hoping that maybe you could shed some light on that.
Sure. I know that at Little Harbor, this is rolling into the second year of them having what was originally a student-requested GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. They only refer to it through those initials, GSA, and I think Principal Lawson has put out 2 different communications about this to parents around the fact that it's not a curricular group. Students in the 4th and 5th grade have the opportunity to consider being part of this during the SEAL block, which we can get into maybe in a future presentation. But the idea behind the SEAL block is around social and emotional learning, and that parents have, and that when students indicate an interest, parents have the ability to opt to not have those students participate. I would say that I know that I have been approached by some parents who have a set of questions around that the GSA at Little Harbor was one of a list of questions they had that revolved around the topic of when we engage topics of sexuality, gender, and gender identity within our schools. And so it's sparked a conversation within the administrative team around trying to implement. The board has an existing policy around gender nonconforming students, and so, but policy is policy, and it does not talk strictly in a lot of detail about implementation. And so we have had the beginning of a conversation at the administrative level about the need to be able to talk in a little bit more detail than we can right now about the way in which we implement some components of that gender nonconforming policy that's been in place from the board since 2016. It's not a new policy. It's been around for quite a while. And so that group of parents who came to talk to me included this GSA question as part of their list of concerns. So we're generally kind of starting to build a conversation that's really about implementation of these of the existing board policy but it comes with questions of when should we be introducing questions of sexuality into any of our instruction or into our clubs and those types of matters. But so this is one piece, and I know there were some parents who had some questions about it at Little Harbor.
Thank you for the clarity. And that conversation at the administrative level, is at all administrative levels, not just the elementary admins, correct?
Correct.
It would be a broader
Correct. So we have a small working group from each of the
district
different levels where we're kind of just exploring, and a lot of this is less about people don't see any. principals will tell you we don't have any challenges in implementation right now, but it's more about being, I think we've talked about before that one of the things we're trying to move towards, and I think the board's indicated in general, regardless of the topic, is being more consistent in the way in which we do a lot of things at buildings. And when it comes to a variety of things, and this is another place where we should be able to articulate what it is we're trying to do and how we make those decisions and what that looks like better than we're probably able to do at the moment. And that's particularly right now that's rising up around this particular issue, but that's true in a variety of different fronts. And that's not necessarily a criticism. It's more just kind of the reality of the organization right now. And there's some strength in the fact that we've been kind of balkanized in the way in which things have operated. But I think there is a desire, the board's indicated a desire to be more unified in our approach to a variety of things. And this is a topic, which is one that we should be more unified in.
Thank you. Lisa.
So I'm really glad to hear that working group is going. I think it might be helpful at some point in the future when you're sort of further along, whether it's part of a future superintendent's report or a memo of some kind. I would sort of love to know just where we land in terms of what the common sort of language we want to use is and what the common practices are that we are going to have. My child was one of the kids who, started the GSA at Little Harbor last year, and it for them personally was a really supportive experience. I do think it bubbled up a lot of legitimate questions about what the age-appropriate ways are to talk about these things, which we should be having as a district, because the kids need to know how to have these hard conversations, and it's another topic that they probably need to know, and teachers need to know how to handle it in a good and consistent way. So I think it would be great to hear later, sort of where we're landing on this.
Yep. And I would say, just in terms of timeline, my intent is this is not like this is not in 2 weeks.
No.
We're resolved. This is kind of a roll, because it isn't, because for the most part, I mean, the types of things, our conversation at the administrative level was more about, not that we had immediate concerns that we weren't sure what to do with. It was, well, we should really be able to talk with more specificity in a unified way around a variety of questions. And so our plan was to have a small working group to kind of suss that stuff out. And one of the things we think might come out of that too is also some recommendations for the policy committee around some tweaks, because there's some things that policy doesn't always age well, and this one for the most part has, but from 2016 till today, there are some adjustments that I think we look at that both that logistically are challenging to live up to portions of the policy. So anyways, we're at the infancy of that conversation, but I think that would be our goal. Would be come back and say, look, here's procedurally how we're trying to do this, even though the volume of things that touch this policy are still not high, and here are some recommendations to the policy committee where procedurally what we think is appropriate on the ground and in the spirit of the preamble of the policy, other aspects of the policy box us in ways where we're not able to live up to the spirit now. And so those are the two types of conversations we're having right now. Again, this is not front burner for us right now, because the reality is we're not running into issues on a daily basis where we're unable to respond. And in fact, the policy speaks to, in terms of gender nonconforming students, speaks specifically to the need to be case by case in the way in which we approach it. It's kind of unique in putting that in there. Simultaneously, though, that leaves sometimes administrators who have not kind of have a common refined understanding of how to make some decisions around this stuff in a position where they might use a different schema to determine how to address an issue connected with policy that might not reflect what happens a mile and a half away at a different school, and we don't want that to be the case. So anyways, so there's a lot of talk about not a lot of action at the moment, but we're starting to have that dialogue.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you for pointing out that anything would be an opt-in. I think that's really important for parents to hear, that nothing is embedded in a curriculum right now, and that things would be certainly communicated out to parents, and it would be an opt-in position. So thank you for clarifying that.
Liz?
I just want to clarify, though, I mean, I think this should be embedded into the curriculum to some extent. I don't know why it wouldn't be embedded into any curriculum, and why, why would we be, if we're talking about people, why would we need to consult with parents about, obviously sharing information and understanding and having parents understand what's going on. Like when Haven comes in to talk about sexuality with young students, I think that's super important. And so I would just say, I think it's important that these, like we just heard tonight, everybody needs to have conversations around mental health and how people are feeling and who they are and whatnot. And I don't know that there should be an opt-in type thing other than some sort of club after school. So I just want to clarify that from my perspective on the school board.
And I think our intent around these issues is to not shut down that conversation. Right. It's just to make sure we're being thoughtful about the way in which we're doing it. And I think because we don't institutionally have answers to, outside of kind of sex ed classes and that sort of thing, where we have a formal kind of scope and sequence about how we are formally introducing concepts. We don't have, and I don't think we're looking to we don't have a discussion about what's the time when it's appropriate, and parents have questions. It's like, I think are you going to introduce if you're going to introduce concepts around maybe let's say non-binary kind of concepts, are you doing that with my kid in kindergarten? And if so, how are you doing it so that I'm in a position to partner with you as a parent around how I'm trying to address these sorts of issues with my child. So that's not we're not even going down that deep yet. I just want to make sure this is clear. We're not doing a deep curricular dive. We are right now looking at the policy, which is really about questions like bathroom utilization, locker room utilization, things like that, and just being able to articulate how we go about that process.
Thank you.
I have a quick question off of what Liz said. Are we saying that the GSA membership is only with parent permission? And is that specific to elementary, or are we saying that at the other schools as well?
Right now, that is exclusively an elementary
Okay.
thing. So in terms of our practice at the moment,
Okay.
this is Little Harbor is asking parents of fourth and fifth graders. That is not, I don't want to say that that's happening in other buildings, because it's not.
Are there other clubs that we do that with?
I don't know the answer to that. So this I will say that some of what I got, and it's a good question, it's a great question. And why would we do that with this and not with other clubs? And I get the core of the question. I can't answer it because I don't know.
Which is why I think it's important, as you said, to develop a bigger conversation with admin at a bigger level of how we operationalize that. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everyone, for
To put
contributing
I
to
do know that
conversation.
other mental health related services and that type of thing at the elementary level are opt-in, where at the middle school they are not. So things like when you want to do the group activities or I think that policy, or that practice rather, not policy, is related more to the mental health side of it, but it's definitely a genuine concern.
And I will tell you, at the high school, the Film Studies Club, you do have to have permission from your parents because they show rated R movies. So there are some other clubs I know at the high school that you have to have signature on, but I don't know all of them.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Zach will keep us apprised of what's going
I will,
on in
and
that
again,
area.
don't expect, this is not a
Right,
short-term
right.
project, so.
Okay, I think we hand it over to Nathan now to talk about ESSER. Am I correct about that?
Thank you. May I just throw out first? It was a full house a little bit ago, and I just, as a parent who went to a lot of functions, I just want to shout out to all the parents, because there was there was not a full house, but I mean, there was an audience out there. And then I expected the students to walk out, and then when every single adult got up and went with them, I thought just how wonderful it was that not only were those, it's no wonder that our kids are who they are with the kind of support that you just saw tonight.
Thank you, Nathan.
My children are at home right now saying, "Dad, you didn't go to as many things as thank you." So the superintendent asked, having looked at the agenda, to update you again as we have been, so we can continue to keep you informed about where we stand with ESSER funds and foster the ongoing dialogue that we've had. So let me first apologize that the work was done over this weekend to finalize some notes, and so you did make your packet, and it's on your table tonight, and that means that there will be not as many questions maybe as you'd like, and we can follow up with those. First thing I want to just remind you, we've talked in the past, there were 3 ESSER funding rounds. ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We didn't really come to call them that until later in the game. The first one was the CARES Act, which happened shortly after the declaration of a national emergency in March of 2020. Portsmouth received an allocation of $286,000 out of ESSER 1, CARES Act. And as I've told you before, I'll remind you that we spent that $286,000 largely in fiscal 20 and 21. There was a lot on technology, Chromebooks and the like. Remember, we all went remote. Kids had to have access, and we wanted to make sure that we addressed that as best we could. There was some staffing involved. There was a plethora of software solutions that still show up in our ESSER funds because they were very much related to providing access on multiple platforms and in multiple ways to gain the opportunity for instruction with students. Today, we're conducting, we're putting out our final claims to the state for reimbursement of elements of that $286,000. That'll happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I wanted to bring to your attention the white piece of paper first with the state's seal at the top, and let you know that in August, New Hampshire Education Department was with us, and they audited our ESSER spending. Specifically, in this case, compliance monitoring they did to make sure that we were complying with the terms and conditions of the ESSER funds and federal law. And this came out again over the weekend, summarizing and finalizing the report on that review. I'm happy to point out, just above the bold face, there are no findings nor corrective actions needed. This is the final report. It was certainly a pleasure to have that delivered via email to our superintendent.
Congratulations, Nathan. This is a big deal for you.
So far, we're okay, and we know what we're doing. We're doing, at least we're playing by the rules so far.
It has Zach's name, but we, have to give you the bulk of the credit.
No, listen, we got some great staff members, but it was important to find that we were complying with all of the terms and conditions. And so I wanted to share that with you. Also let you know that some elements of it, some elements of what they were prepared to review weren't relevant to us because we haven't yet claimed reimbursement yet under ESSER 2 or 3. So, and those add up to almost $4 million. So we've had a nice trial balloon with the first round, and apparently have procedures and policies and practices that are compliant with Uncle Sam's expectations. So share that with you. The second piece of paper, somebody laughed as I was handing them out on the table and said, "Oh, it's at that time of year again. Nathan's bringing colored paper to us," so that it stands out. The green sheet is an updated copy of an ESSER use of funds listing, I guess. And I take just a couple of minutes and walk you through that briefly. And what I wanted you to know, remind you at the top that what the ESSER 2 and 3 funds add up to, 1.2 million in ESSER 2 and 2.7, almost 2.8 in ESSER 3, just shy of $4 million before us. 20% of that ESSER 3 must be set aside by law for purposes of addressing learning loss. So I have not in this analysis called those things out, but there are plenty of things here that satisfy that condition or satisfy that definition. So we're not at risk of failing to do so. First, bullet number 5 I wanted to talk to you, and a board member mentioned when we were doing summary reports for the state at our last meeting, that in August, with all the transitions, I didn't bring you the June 30th fund balance, if you will, to tell you how we did. I'll bring that in the end of October when I bring you the September financials. We'll review the June 30 for what that's worth. The answer to that, or the important information in that is, although we spent within our means, I had told you, and I had managed an expectation right down the line through the spring, that I thought things like the math tutor that we had said would be funded by ESSER and the social worker we hired early, I thought we'd cover that in the general operating budget. And ultimately, substitutes cost us nearly $300,000 more than I had anticipated. And although we were light on custodians for some period and paras we talked about, ultimately our budget impact from the cuts that had been taken in the process the previous cycle played out. And I think, to be fair, a lot of the small things that multiplied in number did make it in, because we didn't necessarily capture them, because there were a lot of services that provided, small stipended projects and efforts that some of our faculty put in with our students, and those didn't get collected as though they were ESSER. We just put those against common budget lines and got those things done all year long. So ultimately, all of this is to say, item number 5, these are things that we are now pursuing the application against ESSER 2 and 3 to fund out of ESSER these things that we did at the end of fiscal 21 and in 22. Predominantly continued spending on instructional technology, Promethean boards and the like in classrooms, rotation of inventory and Chromebooks, software that I've mentioned, Pear Deck and Panda Docs and Screencastify and Ed Puzzle and Modern Teacher and some of those tools that came to us in COVID during the pandemic and continue. The social worker that we picked up in the spring, the math tutor who we carried throughout the year, the Power Scholars program that we did over the last couple of summers, tent rentals that we continued into this last year, as well as a small piece of some student transportation and a smattering of other miscellaneous materials and such. So there's $415,000 there that have been designated that ESSER. There were a lot more things that we thought ESSER would pay for, but I really expect I'd pick up more of this in the budget and didn't. So those are against ESSER now, against this almost $4 million that we're talking about. To give you perspective on commitments already kind of in play, the social worker position we talked about, it's funded in ESSER this year. There's a projection of salary and benefits, taxes and retirement. The math tutor position, again, now I'm under bullet number 6, looking at the dollars in fiscal 23. The elementary outdoor ed position that we picked up, the counselor position that was intended to be in the general fund, but at budget time we agreed we'd kick it back into ESSER, and the math interventionist position that last I knew we are working to hire as we speak, so not filled yet. So those positions in their fullness projected to be charged to ESSER in this, during this fiscal year. And then you'll notice lots of zeros, so some very round estimates of continuing to provide some software materials to support those individuals and those programs, those initiatives. Some student transportation support for some of this after-school busing that was not budgeted that we're trying to do to assist the community in reaching the needs of all our kids in the after-school area period. And then staff and student wellness, which are initiatives that I know you guys have heard us talk about over the last year, where Steve and George were really empowering early on student wellness groups in the schools and the staff wellness committee to contemplate ways that we could invest some dollars to benefit wellness. So that adds up to another $724,000 almost. And then again, to frame this, to make sure that we have some sense placeholders. And this isn't, from this point forward, really, this isn't, it's not committed. You could make changes. You could dance with the budget and do different things. But we had at one point made the suggestion that we would graduate these positions from ESSER to general fund depending on whether they stick or maybe they change, and again, I don't want to predict for you, but I wanted to give you some numbers. So half of the social worker, half of the math tutor, half of the outdoor ed, half of the counselor, half of the math interventionist, there that would be in fiscal 24, for instance. Now, let me remind you, I didn't say this at the outset. Remember that the smaller piece of this, ESSER 2, has a deadline for spend of September of 23, and the balance September of 24. And then, again, some big round numbers. Continued summer programming available, dollars available to invest over the next couple of summers, some additional elementary extended day programming, and some more material. That first page adds up to just in the vicinity of $1.6 million of your four. And so if you flip some catch-alls, not catch-alls, but some larger, some larger categories for you to continue to consider. Infrastructure upgrades, we talked about some of those, and I didn't dig into those right now. That's just a conversation ongoing. We have talked about outdoor activity spaces and talked about securing some space out back at the high school for open air. And then technology continues to be a priority. The idea is that Chromebooks would refresh in both of the available summers too, a summer of 23 and then summer of 24, and then some additional instructional technologies, more Prometheans and the like, could be good investments that we could make. All of that, these are, if you notice in the language of choice, it's for consideration, because those are really just kind of projections to continue our ongoing conversation about this. What was most important, if you go back to the front page, was to brief you on fiscal 22, to let you know our essentially committed position on the things that are in 23, and then to show you some perspective on those things that seem to be in the offing as we continue to have this conversation and then move ourselves ever closer to another budget cycle. So again, I remind you, the 286 that isn't even listed here, the CARES Act, it's now been reviewed by the state. They liked it. We are almost done collecting our reimbursement. The $415,000 has, we're working on the application now. Remember that the way this process works is you're eligible, the funds are eligible to be spent on anything back to March 13th of 2020 when we declared they declared the national emergency. So most of our federal funds demand that you apply first, get approval first, and then spend. In this case, we're able to look back. So we are now working on an application for that first 415 and for the FY23 elements, like those positions. And we'll let you know how that application process goes and how that's received in our future updates. I think that's it, yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. That was very thorough and good. Thank you.
Super clear.
I think we
Super
have,
helpful.
Kerry has a question, and then we'll take more questions after that.
I have two. First, the 20% set aside for learning loss. These items are not necessarily out by learning loss, right? So are we in good shape with that?
Yeah, so I think in review with the superintendent, we agree that there are more than enough here items that would qualify that can be named to serve that purpose, to address that set aside. You certainly could, you could realign and make some additional decisions, but we can meet the set aside expectation with the plans we have now.
And I was going to say that, that was, as my previous gig, we're trying to make sure that we didn't leave any money on the table. When we got into ESSER 3, it was, okay, can we address, do we have the 20% taken care of? Because then you knew you had more freedom with the rest of the funds. So there's plenty of items on the table here that would qualify under that 20%. So I don't have any fear that we will be in a situation where it's like, oh, geez, we didn't think thoughtfully about what would fall under that window. So.
And the 20% is applicable to the ARPA component, which is the ESSER 3 and the longer deadline, September 24th, just FYI.
Yeah. And then my second question, and I'll start by saying I don't think that budget request should come from board members, but then I'm going to make a budget request. So I think, and it came up twice, if I recall, last year on counseling for the high school, and then we heard it again tonight with Eiley, and just that weight, that need, that support, and that was really important to us. And we didn't get in the budget process a formal request for another position, but now there is new leadership. And so just to think about if, there's a way that we can build in support sooner rather than later, if the principal and leadership team feels like that's warranted.
And I would just say some of the conversation we've had is around trying to balance the immediate of putting somebody on the ground, and I get nervous about grant money for short-term money for bodies, because then you eventually hit a cliff. And I know when you guys were going through your budget conversations, I wasn't here yet, but I know we were having a little conversation on the side, and when the decision was made to slide the counselor and whatever the other positions were, I was like, ooh, geez, I don't, it's always, with me, I'm always thinking, what are one-time costs that we can cover with short-term funds? Because I worry about getting into a position where we bring on multiple folks on like a 2-year cycle. Maybe it's 2 years we have them for. It takes them 6 months to figure out what the heck we're doing. They get into a groove for the next year, and then they spend the last 6 months figuring out what the next job is. So I would, but I also know at the same time, it's like the acute need that we're talking about at the same time.
And I think we had a lot of that conversation last year. And I guess my summary was just that there was support for that within the board, and especially in the importance of it. So if this allows that 6 months to be sooner, I mean, we can talk about a longer term commitment, but it seems like that was important to all of us. It just didn't rise to the top need.
Hope, and then Brian, and then we'll go over here.
So I had a question around infrastructure, which I'll get to, but I just wanted to follow up on what Carrie was talking about. We had also had some conversations around increasing our partnerships with mental health counselors outside of, so that we wouldn't be falling on that, which I know there's a significant wait list, there's significant shortage of qualified staff. So I'm just curious, if at some point, if now is not the time, if we can get an update of where we are with some of those partnerships and those options, if, hiring within is not going to, or hiring for a position within is not going to be. And then I had a question around the infrastructure for Nathan. So the bullet 8, the PHS secure open airspace, that's the structure, the open structure that's in between the two buildings, correct?
Gated off
Okay.
and provide
Yeah.
open
Okay.
access there.
And,
so that,
and then we had talked, had a few conversations around the infrastructure of expanding either outdoor seating for cafeteria space or expanding cafeteria space, and just knowing that infrastructure is something that can get passed. I bring this up again because we had such a difficult time going back into school, excuse me, at PHS, specifically because of lunches and trying to get kids on lunch schedules. And so certainly hope we have no more pandemics, but it's concerning to me that we haven't solved for that. So sorry, my throat.
That's okay.
potentially the other side of the building outside. The
And I know
that
at
flat
one
space we
point,
had captured at one
yeah,
point.
at one point Kenny was going to take a look and
Yep.
maybe get some numbers and see if that was an option. But I'm just kind of wondering, when I stop and think about one of our first conversations coming, if we want to say out of COVID, if we're even out of COVID, but coming out of the pandemic and closures was, what have we learned and what do we need to course correct to make sure that we're not in the same situations in the future? And it was a long time before PHS seemed to be able to work out a schedule, and it could be for many reasons besides that. But I do remember lunch was one of the biggest obstacles. So I would like to see us, if we can have dollars and we have space, solve for that. Somewhere within the equation of this process.
Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, Zach, I hear what you're saying about, taking on a body. And I've been very, very sensitive to that since I've been on the board last 5 years. But I do think, these monies are specifically for learning loss and for, I would say, argue for wellness as well. So if we need that short-term support, what's the alternative? Just don't spend it because we don't want to keep on the body. I just want to keep that in mind with the ESSER money, because you know, we do have some things on here for math, which is, I think, great. But it seems like, you know, as you roll in the position, the more, you know, whatever those other holes are, we're going to know much better probably soon where the holes are, especially with all the testing coming back. You know, that's what the money's for, is that to sort of get us back to a point where we don't need them, I'm assuming, right? Learning loss, getting rid of that gap. So I just want to just be, you know, think about that too. And of course, if a position does seem like we should roll into the budget, you know, I like the idea of, you know, the 50% transitions that I think that seems reasonable. But I do think we should look at the acute needs with the ESSER money as much as we can.
Thank you, Brian. Liz?
I just want to further speak to that. When we were having those conversations, I did look at some statistics that were coming out of the Massachusetts schools, and Massachusetts schools were showing, I believe it was last year when everything, using these funds, that Boston seemed to be doing better than some of the other city areas because they were providing social workers or these in-between liaisons between the school and communities that were helping identify needs, homework needs, mental health needs, and whatnot. And so I know that there's somebody working with housing, but I had sort of pointed to that a little bit, that there was these successes there with social workers that did this sort of in between. And so I don't know that those people would necessarily have to be in a position where they have to get trained, and then by the time they're trained, you know, their contract's over, so to speak, because, you know, they could be social workers sort of transitioning into just a similar or newer social worker type role, I guess. So, you know, and obviously hearing, you know, the needs of Eiley tonight, you know, it'd be great to have somebody else that could meet those needs. And so these students aren't falling on deaf ears here. And so, yeah, I think, you know, so somebody with a social work degree could meet those needs as well.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone else?
I would just add that I think it's really important for us to remember that COVID certainly magnified mental health issues, but mental health was a significant problem before COVID ever came about. So it's not going away anytime soon. I'd rather see us spend the money up front and figure out the problems on the back end. You know, we seem to do that pretty well here.
Okay. Carrie, do you want to have a closing remark?
One other thing just from those prior discussions was that her position got combined. There was supposed to be a substance abuse counselor and another counselor, and so that was part of that. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Nathan, you're going to periodically give us more colored paper, correct?
Nathan, on a side note, can I ask, what is the YMCA Power Scholars Program? Because I feel like that's maybe the first time I've heard of it, but obviously I haven't been on the board as long as other people, so.
Oh, I may not be that was a summer initiative launched each of the last 2 summers, I think. Or was it just this last summer?
Is it just at the high school,
2020.
or?
It's at least 2 summers.
At least 2 summers. No, it was
No, it's elementary
elementary, middle, maybe.
I think, yeah, it's not high school.
Sorry that I don't know.
We have to get more information.
It was it's a Granite YMCA program, and I will tell you that I think, yeah, it was a couple, because we spent maybe twice that. We spent that amount each summer, maybe, and the other got eaten up in the operating budget the first cycle.
Okay, sorry, I hadn't seen it before, and I was curious what that was, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to consideration and approval of policies, second reading. The first one is the extracurricular and co-curricular activities.
Okay.
JJA. Maybe we should start off by saying, do we have a motion to approve the policy?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Margot. Do we have a second? Pip? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Margot.
So this is coming back for second read. You remember it came before the board, and it was a lengthy conversation with some thoughts on further edits, which we brought back to the policy committee and made sure that we invited to that meeting. As your policy committee minutes show, both Steve Canosi and Cause to make sure that those that were going to be carrying out the policy could could live with the edits in the direction that we were going in. And so, and we reached a great spot of focusing on that everybody at the high school is a student first, and starting with that as our threshold of what we can discipline. So I'd say that the second reading reflects the strikeouts of lines 42 to 65, which is what we discussed at the last meeting. And it is a clear step out. The school is stepping out of off-campus, out-of-school behavior unless it impacts the learning environment, which is clearly outlined in policies JIC and JICD. The only thing I will say that somehow didn't make this copy is that the policy committee discussed cutting lines 7 through 11, beginning where it says on line 7 at the end where it begins with extracurricular, and following 2 to line 11 after over academics. That should be cut because it's very it's murky there on extracurricular versus co-curricular. So we thought that that didn't add any value to the current policy. It actually made it more confusing, and so that is to be removed.
Okay, thank you, Margot. Do we have any discussion? Yes, Lisa.
One quick question that might just be a copy edit. I did let you and Margot know this question previously, but the way the policy reads now, it would seem to apply to K-12. And I believe that the bulk of this applies specifically to PHS. So I would like to suggest that we consider either calling it PHS, extracurricular and co-curricular in the title, or if there is some piece that applies specifically to the other schools, calling that out just for clarity's sake.
Yep.
And I believe you did say it was only PHS?
It's currently, it's written, so the NHIAA only applies for our high school.
Because the way it's written right now, we specifically mention high school in 2 sections, which makes it seem like only those sections are specific to high school and the rest of it applies K-12.
Yeah, it's a good catch.
Actually, though, I believe we discussed removing high school in the first paragraph so that it said integral part of school life. That was one edit that we planned on a while
So
back.
then if we do that,
in line 23 and 36, we still make specific reference to high school. And I don't know if that was meant to be removed or if it's supposed to still be there. I don't object, I just want it to be
We did have
clear.
a conversation about how this would apply at the middle school level as well. And my understanding was that it was that we were supposed to strike the word high from all of it.
Yep.
Because there isn't a reason that it shouldn't apply. I'm sorry that I didn't
It's not
pick up on it
yeah.
in this version, but
and it's not
I thought
reflected
we
in the
already made
minutes.
that change.
So we're at the point right now, we can just decide. It's at second read. If we want to make the edit to strike any reference to high school and leave it as is, or to leave the high school and put a colon after the title high school. Those, I would say, are the 2 options on the floor.
I mean, as a practical matter, I don't think we're going to find like 3rd graders who are suddenly like embroiled with the police over like, big things. So I think it would be fine personally to just strike high school if that's
I
what
guess the
simplifies
question
it.
I would ask Zach is, when this is read by your building heads, like what's going to make the most sense for it being operationalized and to parents as well?
So I think even I'm trying to look, I feel like this is a May statement anyways. I'm trying to find the May statement. Portsmouth High School, it's 36. It's Portsmouth High School, but you can say that about all students. Students who violate federal, state, or municipal statutes or ordinances or school board policies may be determined ineligible. So I don't think it locks anybody in. I think it's just as easy to have it be consistent. I don't know if you've got the May language, then you strike high school from
Yep.
all the places, and it applies to all students, knowing that we're most likely to run into it in a high school situation.
That
Makes sense.
Okay, is that acceptable to the maker
Yeah, I
of the
think-
motion?
Do you want a motion?
Mark, well,
Can we
we're-
still discuss here?
yeah, I'm just asking if the first and the second agree to that change, to that
Yes.
amendment.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay,
I
yep,
do.
Margot and
Yes.
Pip
Yep.
agree to that. Okay, Liz,
I guess I'm just trying to understand, in the committee meeting minutes it states, and I apologize, I wasn't able to make this meeting, as far as scheduling, and I don't know if we have a date for the next meeting, to be able to understand when we're doing this again, so I'm able to attend, but, it says Kathleen summarized for the committee where she believed the changes stand and asked for any corrections if she misunderstood. And she made 3 points. Upon a finding that there was an impact on education school setting, conduct occurring only during the season, and an athletic contract signed by the participant and their parent guardian. Where am I finding that it's upon a finding that there was an impact on education and school setting? 'Cause
That's
I'm not.
JIC and JICD. That's when the school can get involved.
But
So-
JJA is saying that the school can get involved for any violation of a federal, state, or municipal statute. So, I
Right,
mean,
and
it's
this
not
is-
cross-referencing any sort of disruption to the school environment in doing so. So
No,
essentially,
because this policy, Liz, is stepping out of off-campus. The only situation that we would get back involved in off-campus is if the actions at off-campus impacted the learning environment, which is clearly
that's not what this policy
not in
says.
JJA. It's not meant to be in JJA. It's in JIC and JICD.
But if that's your intent, then it needs to be in JJA, because JJA is saying Portsmouth High School students who violate federal, state, or municipal statutes and ordinances or Portsmouth School Board policies may be determined ineligible from participation in extracurricular activities. So then it should say per whatever you're just saying, per whatever, like
We
per.
actually did discuss removing that
Okay.
ineligibility paragraph altogether, in my memory. For that reason exactly, because what Liz is saying is if you don't reference that policy, this does state that violating a federal or state law
Or a municipal
allows us
statute or board
to
policy.
do exactly what we were trying to get away from doing.
So the paragraph eligibility.
So I think it
should
needs to
come
be,
out.
there needs to be a
Ineligibility.
detriment, that and a detriment in the classroom, or however you had worded, we had worded that, the.
Right, well, or it just needs to reference that other policy.
But I do think that if it's ingrained in this policy that the intent is to have a finding that there was an impact on education or the school setting, then that should be ingrained in this policy too. Because if we're.
It's sort of redundant with the other policy, though.
So.
No, I get that, but I think when you're being so.
Let's raise hands, please.
So strong in this policy, then I think that you have, if that's your intent of this policy, is that if a kid violates a board policy or municipal statute or anything, then it's only if it disrupts the classroom. I think that
No,
needs
that's
to be
not true.
ingrained.
No, that's not what the intent of this policy is.
So why does it say that in the committee meeting minutes? I mean, if the intent of this policy is to regulate, so you're basically saying in this policy, if a kid does something outside of school, then they can be in trouble for it in school, and it doesn't have to affect the
We are
classroom.
not saying that in this policy, and the minutes are not.
Well, that's what this
The-
policy reads, is what I'm telling you. So
Here's what I
I'm
can
just a little
say.
bit
The
concerned that
minutes are
that's-
confusing, right?
It's not so much the minutes, it's the policy.
No, actually, I would disagree with that. We've had hours of conversation on that. The first part of this policy sets that extracurriculars are a privilege and can be taken away when when rules are broken. That is very outlined in the first and follows suit with eligibility and with ineligibility of saying, if you break that, the first thing that's going to go is your privilege, not your right to school. So those are supported there. What is mentioned in the minutes, which does not need reference in this policy because it's in a separate policy, is that if you have a situation off campus where the behavior impacts the learning environment of the school, that is the place where the school can get involved in discipline. JJA is removed the discipline consciously. That's the change we've made. The discipline resides in JIC and JICD. The only thing that's in JJA is participation, not discipline, and what would result in lack of participation.
Potato, though, you know, that's why I still have concern for this policy.
Okay. Lisa.
I think Pip had her hand up, and I also want to hear from Nick, just to make sure that our one student here is heard on this. I didn't actually have anything to add.
Pip, do you want to talk first? Or?
I think that the last distinction that was made was very important, which is that this is not, that under ineligibility, we are not suggesting that there can be, that we will be having you know what, I'm sorry, I'm contradicting myself as I speak. I think that I can see that we have I can see why we've landed where we have, but I can also see Liz's argument that if you read the ineligibility policy, I'm sorry, the paragraph, just the first 3 lines of it, it suggests that we are allowed to do exactly what we were trying to move away from. So, can you explain
Shall we
to
have
me
Nick comment? Nick,
how
would you
we
like to
might word
comment?
that?
Yeah, I think I'm more or less in agreement. I'm not seeing anywhere in the policy where it specifies that it has to, that like the break of the law or policy has to occur on or related to school, and it does seem to imply that any student who violates any federal, state, or municipal statute or ordinance or Portsmouth School Board policy can, on the strength of this, be determined ineligible for participation in extracurricular activities with no other conditions.
That is
I
the
guess.
condition. So
Okay.
remember, extracurriculars are a privilege, not a right.
So our goal
if a
is-
student violates that, what the school can do is take away extracurricular participation. We cannot take away classroom participation. So the whole point of this policy is about participation in extracurriculars. That's what this policy is doing. Who can participate, when can they participate, and when can they not? That's what the policy, where it's getting convoluted is that we had a policy that gave us the right to step in a very carved out section, and we've taken that out because it was confusing and it was not consistent.
All right, thanks.
Does
I
that
think
make
I
sense?
Yeah, I think I misinterpreted the intent. I guess.
Carrie
Thank you.
Hope.
Question, Margot, does removal of the, like, because we have the eligibility statement, do you think removal of ineligibility, which is where Pip was going, helps us to address that?
The change that's reflected in that's different from the previous policy is that, if you remember correctly, the previous policy applied for 365 days. And we've gone back to it only applying during a season. So one of the changes there is it's trying to bring that back. Could you strike it and not change the meaning of the policy?
I think that answers my question. And to summarize, I think I'm in favor of moving this forward. And I appreciate all of the work that's been done to get it this far.
Go back to the policy committee?
No, this is second, no. No, because
Well,
we've
you're
had our
taking things out and
opportunities.
putting things in.
There's some comments on, oh yeah, Hope, sorry.
Okay, Hope.
So my understanding of the policy is that though we can remove, there are other steps that can be put in place. That's not just the first go-to. Is that correct, Margot?
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I also just, I guess I would ask, because it has been brought to my attention by audiences that do actually watch us, that this is the most confusing section, and I get policy can be confusing, but it just seems that, like, as our chair was just saying, does it need to go back? And I would like to move forward on it tonight, but I would ask whatever's happening in the policy committee, it seems like we're still doing policy committee work, a lot of policy committee work sometimes here.
In our board meeting.
And in our board meeting. And so I don't know if that's because people can't be there and there's discussions that need to be had or whatever, but I would appreciate that that get resolved so that when things get brought forward, there can be minor edits to it and that it's not so confusing, not only to other board members that haven't been part of those discussions, but to our audience. And that's what's been voiced to me by constituents. So that it's not to at all say I understand the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this and the frustration that can come with the confusion of sitting at the table tonight. But I just want to bring that up because it's been brought up to me multiple times by viewers. So
Lisa, Pip, Liz.
I have a question about that same paragraph, because I hear the idea that the second sentence, with the intention to only, if we do take action, have it apply to the existing sports season. That's the intent of that second sentence. The first sentence, maybe we don't need all of that. I mean, maybe we say if a student is determined to have violated school board policy, and they are removed from participation, it will only apply to the current season, and then we don't need the whole thing. And I'm not sure if there's a bigger piece that I'm missing that we're trying to get at with the first sentence there.
I think it's consistency because it mirrors the eligibility language. So
Okay.
if you're going to define eligibility, that they have to be compliant with the law, then when they're not compliant with the law, they're ineligible. It's very black and white.
And this is very few students. We're waiting until they are actually found guilty, right? We are not doing this off of police reports or, you know, SRO conversations with a precinct. We are doing this based on a legal process that concludes. So it's like,
Yeah, we have
very rare. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Less than 1%.
There'll be very few.
Okay.
I would anticipate that we'd have very few situations that actually come to fruition on the legal side while kids still are with us at the high school. Most of those will stretch out beyond, and any conclusion that happens in the legal system will happen
And we would
after
not
they're no longer with
remove
us.
them from participation while a legal process or investigation was pending or in some way unconcluded.
That's what our due process policy states.
Okay.
Pip.
We may want to change students who violate to students who are found guilty of violating, just to clarify that matter. But I just want to clarify my position, and I'm sorry that I've added confusion to this discussion. I think that ultimately the reason that that section has stayed is because what we've decided is to hand over the responsibility of teaching students appropriate behavior around as participants in extracurriculars to the people who supervise those extracurriculars. So what we've taken out is all of the ways that the school would discipline a child, and instead we're saying if you are found by your team, or I'm sorry, your coach or the athletic department to have had inappropriate behavior, then that would allow that allow them to be deemed ineligible to participate. So,
okay,
I am in favor of keeping it as it is at this point, but I do think we should specify that they are found guilty of violating it.
So Portsmouth
so
High
we're
School
not looking for
students-
people who are
No,
violating.
Portsmouth students who are found
Found
guilty
guilty
of violating.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, does
And
the
then
maker of the motion agree to that amendment?
Yes.
Does the second? Yes, Pip's proposing it, so.
Yes.
obviously-
So I
Rule
guess-
there, Nancy.
I guess I would just ask again.
Wait, hold on. I'm up. It's my turn. I thought.
but I'm not finished.
And
Okay,
Pip's not done.
Let Liz speak
Okay.
first.
Go ahead. Pip's not done.
Oh, Pip
There was
isn't
just one
finished.
other
I'm sorry.
change that I believe should have been made here, where it said, it was a may that should be, so, let's see, that they may have something, it's in co-curricular activities where it says, students may, line 69. Students may be determined, no, sorry, line 70. Students may not have their grades affected. It should have been shall not, I believe, have their grades affected, because that may gives the option of having them affected. So, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, does the maker of the motion agree to that edit?
Yep.
And the second obviously does. Okay. Liz was next. Sorry,
Yeah,
Liz.
I guess I just. You guys have a lot of issues with this trying to encompass somebody that's guilty in a juvenile case. First off, there has been, and just Zach, so you're aware, there has been concerns raised by some attorneys in our community about the fact that there is this memorandum of understanding between the police officers and the high school and sharing juvenile information. Juvenile information is highly confidential. So unless the school is joined because the child has an IEP or a 504 or needs residential placement, there's not going to be the school will likely not be a party to some of the juvenile actions, and so therefore would never have a right essentially to understand what the finding was on the child. And so that's why I think that this like, this is why I've advocated for changing this policy altogether. And I think to Hope's point, as far as there being confusion, my understanding about why we're having these conversations is because we're taking a policy and not only changing a section of it per the motion last time or the time prior, but we're taking a policy and really trying to revamp it. And what we heard from the juvenile police officer was that when a child comes into a delinquency through violation of a municipal or federal or state statute, the diversion is to get them into extracurricular activities. And so I still think that this policy is garbage, to be honest with you, because I understand that there's some need to deter children from doing wrong, but I think we can do it in other ways in how we word our other policies. If we're really putting this policy on the police to investigate and having a finding on a child that the child is determined delinquent, then I mean we're not even using the proper language. So it's just you might never get that information. So and for the school to continue to try to get that information, I would be concerned about that too. So I think there's some legalities here that maybe everybody doesn't fully appreciate, and I understand that that this is sort of a historic thing, and we're kind of breaking this historic tie to these kind of disciplinary practices, and that's what the hope I thought was in doing some of this. So I'm just a little bit concerned with, I don't want to have a policy just to have a policy that we're not going to use. And so I would suggest this go back to committee yet again and continue to have these conversations, continue to bring it back, and maybe not at the next meeting, but a meeting after we have another conversation about it, and maybe we get more feedback from the community. I don't know. But I think this needs to be ongoing. Thank you.
Okay, I see Lisa, Liz, and Kerry. I'm sorry, Lisa, Hope, and Kerry.
So I'm trying to take this all in. I think I want to just echo what Hope said. I feel strongly at this point that we need to have a policy committee with 3 board members who can attend all of the policy committee meetings and who can meet on a regular schedule, because I fully understand that these are tough conversations, but it's really hard to process and come to a really reasonable and thoughtful conclusion about policy when the committee is not able to meet regularly and kind of keep us updated. So I don't know if that needs to be a future agenda conversation, but I just feel like, we talked about during our retreat about having committee members present at committees as a requirement of being on the committees, and I just feel like that's not what's happening, and I don't know why, but
it's because of scheduling.
Okay, Hope.
So to Liz's point, I don't want to have a policy that's just a policy, but I also don't want to have a policy that can't be operationalized by our superintendents, assistant superintendent, and building heads, because it may be confusing to them if they weren't part of the process, or if we're doing this between us. So again, I would love to move forward, but I also don't want to move forward if I don't have a solid, confident understanding from our superintendent and assistant superintendent that they feel, yes, I can see how this can be operationalized right now between the different buildings heads, and the language is clear and it will be clear. So again, it's no disrespect to, I know, the hours and work that's been put in, and to those that have been regularly meeting and putting their time regularly towards this. I just want to make sure we have something that is clear and being executed, because that's where we have gotten in the most trouble with our policies in this district, is we have policies and then they're very vague or loose or just not implemented well.
Kerry, thank you, Hope. Kerry.
Although I appreciate just the practicality that Liz raised in wanting, this to be usable, there are legal references, like this is part of compliance with RSAs, and I think where I just recommend that we move to vote on this, and I'm in favor of passing it, because I think does a huge leap towards what we were trying to accomplish. And I think that in our prior discussions about disciplinary policy and diversion and things like that, that is so much bigger than this one policy and should be part of our strategic planning, should be part of the district vision and goals and things like that. It's not going to be, that conversation is not going to happen by talking about this policy one more time.
Okay, I have a comment, and then I think we'll have a vote. You all know that I'm not in favor of this. I truly believe that the policy that we've had in place for the past 10 years has worked successfully. I think the proof of that is that we don't have second offenders. Students learn at the first offense that they have a consequence, they abide by the consequence, and they don't come back. They learn their lesson. I don't think we should change this at all. And I know you all have, most of you have very strong feelings about this, and I respect that. I absolutely respect that, but I vehemently disagree that what we've had in place for the past 10 years, and the reason why we put it in place 10 years ago was because the behavior was out of control, or getting out of control. So I will not support this, but again, I respectfully, respect what you people all have to say about this. So, yes, Margot.
I just want to clarify a couple of things that have been thrown around. For starters, in terms of the original policy we had came out of the Life of the Athlete, which is on NHIAA, which recently they did change to reflect very clearly that they want to emphasize restorative practice, and that like the direction that we've taken is that it needs to go back to the athletic department, and it's the behavior that is established by the coaches. And if you read the Life of an Athlete, that is exactly what they're saying, is that there needs to be preseason meetings, there needs to be training for coaches, youth leadership needs to be trained on what to do and encourage healthy, and that there needs to be stakeholder unity, which is that signature that we've required. So in the conversation, to the other point of can it be operationalized, that's exactly why Steve and Kaz were at the last meeting. We invited them back, and that's what the minutes, if everybody read the policy minutes, so that's what the minutes clearly say. The question we had to them is, can this be operationalized? Does this work? And Steve Canosi said, yeah, the threshold is we can do what we can do for our students. We can't get into this business of did they or did they not do this, which Kaz said they want to step out of, the police doesn't step into, but we step into. So it was to actually make things clearer. And I would just make sure in the light of restorative, we are not taking away practices. So it is not a disciplinary. I know that was stated earlier. They may still practice. They lose participation depending on the circumstance in a game or beyond. So I just want to be clear on that, because I think it was said that we're discouraging participation in extracurriculars, even though we know that's what science supports. No, that's what Life of an Athlete supports, is to encourage extracurricular. And that's what this policy is stating. I don't feel like we need more time. I will say, and I appreciate the feedback from the public. We've gotten the packets out earlier. All the policies are in there, and I only heard from one board member with comments on the policy. You've had the packet for 5 days with the minutes. I don't want to be having these conversations at the board meeting. That's why the packets are going out early, and I said at last meeting, if you have questions on the policies, those should happen before the board meeting. So I don't know any other way to do it. Totally open to a new process. Agree that the policy committee should meet more often, but we're trying our best to get them out early with the minutes so that you have the opportunity to comment, so we don't have to spend this much time on it.
I want to thank Margot for her hard work on this. I know the policy committee has worked really hard, but Margot's kind of spearheaded this whole thing, and I think we need to say thank you to Margot.
It has been a full group effort. I don't want to take ownership, but I do think we're ready for a vote.
We're ready for a vote, and we're going to have a roll call vote. And
with the amendments that we talked about.
Yes. The amendments have all been approved by the maker of the motion.
Can you state the amendments, please?
Yes. Any reference, the word high school will be removed, so it'll just say Portsmouth students. Lines 7 starts at extracurricular through 11, ending at academics, will be removed. Line 36, after students who will say are found guilty of violating.
It's adjudicated delinquent for most things, so I don't know
Instead of students, say Portsmouth adjudicated delinquents? That's what you'd like it to read?
Well, it's in a juvenile case, you're not guilty. You would be adjudicated delinquent.
I don't like that word. I want to keep
Not
it.
all
Portsmouth
students
High
are
School
juveniles.
students.
So there's a finding. There's a delinquency finding is what it would be. So there's some terminology. So I would just make sure you're
Didn't this
lining
go
up the
through
terminology
Kathleen,
correctly.
though?
Yes,
Wasn't there
yes.
legal, so if that legal terminology was needed, wouldn't she have added it?
But we're changing that here.
But it's not guilty because it's not a criminal. It's not a criminal
All right,
thing.
all right.
Would it be okay to say found
Fine.
delinquent?
Or just
Yeah,
findings?
it would be found
delinquent.
delinquent.
Margot.
Okay, found delinquent.
Then it doesn't apply to students 18.
Yeah, I
Which
guess
is
you
all
could
say
say or
or
guilty.
Yeah, I would say
So then we
delinquent.
leave it at
alone.
violate. I think we leave it where it stands.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree with
Just
that.
keep it where it is.
Students
please.
who violate. And then the only other edit is line 70, instead of may,
we
we'll
have
say
shall.
shall.
Okay, does everybody understand those?
Yes.
Okay. Let's have the roll call.
Well,
Please.
sorry, we did add found guilty to specifically make it so that it had to be like found by a court, whereas violate kind of implies that the school can determine that on its own. So should we say like found legally to have violated? Or in some way that
That's a
might-
good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
I
kind
agree
of
with
leaves
you.
it in the
That's why I
hands of the
brought it up.
courts, which I think was the intent
Well, I
behind
think the
changing
issue you run
movement.
into is you're also including Portsmouth School Board policies. So who's going to be the adjudicator of that? So you're running into a little bit of a rift there.
By state, federal, municipal, official. I mean, I just feel like it's getting overly wordy.
Yeah.
We're talking about in the context of laws passed by governments.
I think we should say Portsmouth High School students who are found guilty of violation of federal, state, and municipal statutes. Originally, what we said is how I think we should keep it. Does everyone agree?
I would just keep it as is for now.
Yeah, take the word, yeah, just leave it at 36.
Okay.
We can run it back to Kathleen to make sure that it wasn't
Okay.
amiss from a
Okay.
legal
And add it to
perspective.
2023's review.
What was that?
Or also just understand like how it ends up applying later on, I guess, when we'll deal with it then.
Okay,
So
let's
have
have
a
our roll call vote.
All right. So this would be on the amended version of the policy with the amendment, with the
JJA.
versions that were just laid out. Liz Barrett,
Yay.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
No.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayburgh,
No.
Hope Van Epps,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion passes
Passes.
7-2. Okay, the next one is suicide prevention and response, JLDBB.
Okay,
Does
that
everybody have
is
that?
coming back for two reasons, so we have to take them as separate pieces. So from a policy perspective, let me find it, sorry, I had it in front of me. JLDBB. Okay, there's two reasons it's coming back. One, there is mention to a plan that we didn't previously have. So we now have the plan, which in new business we need to approve. Seeing that there is now a plan and making the edit of the dates, which were meant to be withdrawn from JLDBB. So the only change, as you know, the reason why this first came before the board was the new state requirement of putting the suicide hotline on student ID cards. When that came back to the board, we identified that we needed the plan, and the plan is here tonight. This was originally a state statute in 2020. COVID blurred that. So the correction should stay in line 9. It should just start, take out no later, it should just start with the superintendent shall. In line 16, again, you remove on or before May 31st, 2020. And then in line 53, right at the beginning should say, after approval of the plan, comma, the superintendent shall assure that beginning with the 2022-2023 school year. So you're updating the date on the school year. You're assuring that the approval has happened before the superintendent can implement the training.
Okay.
So that's the policy piece of it that needs approving. The second half, it's confusing because the policy refers to a plan, is that later, in new business, we need to approve the plan. But there is now a plan.
So we need to approve, you want us to approve this first?
We need to approve the policy first, now that the policy contains a plan. And what we're approving on the policy for second read is that it has plan, yes, and that those edits I mentioned of the removal of the dates that statute has passed.
Line 53 again, what should it be?
Line 53 should read, it should start with, after approval of the plan, comma, the superintendent shall assure that beginning with the 2022-23 school year. So updating the year and circling back to the beginning portion of the plan policy, which requires board approval. It's tying those two pieces together, which was lacking in the previous version.
Okay, do we have a motion to, let's do the motion first. Do we have a motion to approve this policy?
Motion.
Pip says yes. Second?
Second.
Brian? Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Quick question, and this is also about the chronology.
Closer.
The earlier draft of the policy made reference to this suicide prevention plan that we'll see later tonight being updated every 2 years from a specific date. We've removed the date, so I just want to clarify if, for example, we approve that plan now, when is the next deadline for the district to revise and resubmit the plan to the board? Because that was in the original policy, and we've
Yep.
removed that timing.
And that got removed because the statute
No, I
passed.
understand all of that.
So Kathleen said 2024. And what I have to understand is, because 2022 now, what I have to understand is it by the date of today's meeting? But it is 2 years. It's still 2 years. That part hasn't changed.
Would I be able to suggest an amendment where we just put October 31st of 22 in there instead of May of 2020, so then it would be 2 years from now? Or is that not our intention here?
That's a fair question. Kathleen's edit, which didn't come before the board, was to just strike the dates.
My
I
only
have the
concern
email printed
would be
out.
that then we have no enforceable way to make sure the plan is updated.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
But is the statute, I wonder if statute refers to the May date and just getting on a May cycle?
I'm fine with the May cycle as well. I
Yeah.
just like the
Yeah.
idea of there being specificity around
Yeah.
when we expect the plan to come back for review.
So it's
So-
May, so
yep.
maybe it's May 31st, 2024 would be the next time.
Yeah, that Kathleen said, since the plan will be approved in 2022, the biannual review need not happen until 2024. So we can just amend.
Unless you use the date that you approve the policy as the last updated date and go 2 years from that, whatever that date should be. And then you just reference the bottom of the policy. So whether it's October 11th, November 17th, May 3rd, you just know it's 2 years from that.
Yep.
So could we just say this policy will be updated every 2 years?
It does say that.
Right. So do
Yep.
we have to say any more than that?
That's what line 16 reads. It just, I will say this, to Lisa's question,
Just
thank you
'cause
for
it's
reminding
been
me.
sitting here for several years and we've had a little going on.
So one thing that the policy committee is working on with Kathleen Dwyer is that this district owns several policies that refer to mandatory trainings or certification. And so we are in the process of making a spreadsheet on what those are so that we can make sure we are compliant with the policy, because we own the policies. So we need to make sure of the trainings that are required in the policies that we're compliant with when those trainings are happening. So that is going to happen. That's a process thing related to a policy, but, so that's all I can say.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're proposing that we just strike in line 9 the phrase "no later than May 31st, 2020," start the sentence after that.
Yep.
And then Patty, you're saying that from the timestamp of whenever we approve it, then there's an understanding.
Yep.
All
That's
right.
how we look at our policies currently, by that date on the bottom. So that would be consistent
Okay.
with our normal review.
Totally fair.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Can we vote on this?
Yes.
Can we have a voice vote, I think? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, great. Now we go to the consideration and approval of the first reading of policies, and that is the sexual harassment policy is first.
Okay,
Does
so
everybody have that?
this is coming before you. We previously had a sexual harassment policy, one that was in our employee section and one that was in our student section, which the New Hampshire School Board Association had as well. What they have done is they have made a much more thorough, in-depth policy with updated language and updated steps for investigating versus disciplining that they are replacing, which will replace our current GBAB and JBEB. So this ACAC will replace our current sexual harassment policies. How does it differ than our current sexual harassment policy? It's more detailed with more modern language. The biggest difference is what the previous policy didn't state was that the person doing the investigation cannot be the person handing out the discipline. So the greatest change you're seeing in this policy from what we previously had was that, furthermore, it also states that when a grievance is first reported, it does not have to be in writing. It's trying to encourage that the report happens. The previous policy was a written report was the first step. Now you can go to an adult verbally and cite your grievance. There will be a place where in the process it has to be written. So it's just more layers to the process to encourage the right people doing the right reporting. It's flushed out a more detailed investigation, and it's updated the language. And so if we pass this tonight, we would then remove our GBAB, which is our employee sexual harassment policy, and our JBEB, which is our student. We are not removing our reporting forms, which still sit in our handbooks, because we felt as a policy committee, we still wanted very open and easy access to the reporting forms for that. But this new policy states that the first report does not have to be written. That's clear enough.
Any questions? Lisa?
We have separate policies that also tie into Title IX. Are those also needing changes to make it possible to report without a written report, or is that separate from this?
That's a great question. So this change came down from New Hampshire School
Okay.
Board. So this is a required change.
Okay.
But those policies are on our docket of things that we also need to look at.
Okay.
Good question.
And to be honest, I don't know what those require right now.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, did we take a motion to, no, we didn't, did we? Do we have a motion to approve the sexual harassment and grievance policy?
So move.
Ann, second?
Second.
Brian? We'll do a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Margot, again, thank you. Thank you for your
I'm passing it to Patty now.
Okay,
Patty.
the next one is the consideration and approval of the suicide prevention plan. And we had that excellent presentation from our students. And Patty, I guess we're handing it to you.
Thanks. So this is the plan that goes to the previously mentioned policy that we just talked about. And what you had in your packet, in addition to the plan that was drafted up, was the list of the components that were provided as part of the model policy by the NHSBA. And there were A through, I believe, J items on there that they basically wanted the plan to include terms or reference to or discussion about how those certain components would be included in the plan. The plan that you have in front of you is a PDF of a plan that's actually going to be a Google Doc, so all of the different components are linked. And we went through, Chris Burke really did a lot of work with this with Amy Donovan, and I helped to wordsmith and clean up some of this. But they went through and they identified each of the A through J sections, either in the table of contents, which you'll note, or in the appendices, or actually in the actual wording of the plan, and it includes the components that are required per the New Hampshire State School Board Association model policy list that was given to you. So hopefully you had a chance to review that. Obviously today's training went into a lot more depth than this, and this is a plan that is meant to be a district-wide plan for folks to follow, elementary through secondary.
Thank you, Patty. Do we have any questions? Kerry?
Just a suggestion, the mental illness is viewed as a stigmatizing term, and so mental health problems, just because it distinguishes that they're problems, it's not a illness is thought to be defining.
Yep.
So just a minor change. And then one other question, and I'm sorry I didn't review this until today, there's a distinction around self-harm and suicidal ideation, and there was just, and I know that this is coming from a sample policy, but under, we don't have a line, but under like roles and responsibilities, all school personnel, I'm on page, I don't know.
Is it page 6?
Page 6, yep.
Yes.
And then it says suicidal ideation may include the following. And then there it says gestures that indicate possibility of self-harm, which I know is concerning on its own, but isn't necessarily a concern for suicide. And then in Appendix A, it does appropriately have self-harm as associated with depression and not with suicide, which is more typical clinically. So, I mean, I know that we're using a sample policy. I don't want to like nitpick the things. That was just one inconsistency I noticed and wanted to point out.
Okay. Any other comments? Lisa?
I have one question just for clarification. The plan details for elementary and middle school sort of what sort of dosage of education students will receive, and then it's not as clear to me what's going to happen in the high school. Can you just talk me through what you know right now in terms of, like, is it only like some sort of 9th or 10th grade health class that they have? My kid's in 9th, so I just don't know how it works.
So currently, so the whole elementary piece, that it's also piggybacked on the SEL pilot that's sort of going on. So we didn't want to get into too much detail there because we don't have that nailed down just yet. But there's the signs and symptoms of suicide, the SOS training that's going on in the high school. You heard from the group this evening. And then there's the 10th grade health component in the curriculum. So there's all of that going on at the high school between 10th grade and this.
So those are separate at the high school? So there's not just a 10th grade thing, there's another thing that's happening?
Education of signs and symptoms of suicide risk is a work in progress.
Oh, okay.
So right now it's 10th grade is solid. How that's going to splay out going down to 9 and up through 12. And you heard them speaking tonight even about the desire to have something done at freshman orientation, and you don't want it to be a one-off either. So that's still a work in progress.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other comments? We need to vote on this, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Do we have did we get a first? Do we have a motion to approve? Margot, second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Pip? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, and thank you, Patty, for all your hard work on this, too. It sounds like you've been really involved with it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we flip the page of our agenda, and we did
it's
this,
me.
correct? Yes, we did that, okay. The Delegate Assembly Summary. We want to thank Kerry for attending the forum on October 1st, and we heard from you that it was a good day, it was a productive day.
I thank you for being able to represent the Portsmouth School Board. I really enjoyed it, which means I'm a school board geek officially. There were, I think it was 161 possible delegates that could go, and there were 49 there, which I guess is about status quo, about a third of folks. But was very interesting to me that a few votes came down to 2 or 3 votes. So it was really important, I think, that we make sure we maintain that. Also, interestingly, so apparently, typically, the New Hampshire, the SBA recommendations for support, not support, if the NHSBA doesn't support it, it often just goes, like it's done, it's gone, they don't do anything. So it was unique that 2 of them that were not recommended to be supported did actually pass by a vote. And I found it very interesting that all of our positions were what the final votes came out to be. So we were 8 for 8. One thing, we're smart. We are the trendsetters. So I did speak about the no-cost school lunches and pieces like that when that was appropriate from our conversation. I did want to mention the dues to the National School Board Association conversation, because that was a very interesting conversation. So as you know, there was sort of the national organization we had been a member of had some what was deemed to be kind of politically charged statements around education. And then a lot of the state school board associations were pulling out and going to another organization, or, you know, doing all different things. And so the motion that did not pass was that there had to be a majority vote for what NHSBA joins at this meeting every year. And really the conversation from NHSBA was that that decision to pull out really split the membership. Some people were happy about it, some people are upset about it, but that it was really important for them to try to align with an organization that was going to consider all its members and try not to do things that didn't divide its members. So anyway, just something that may come up again. The national organization that NHSBA is a part of doesn't have a lot of infrastructure or written, this is what we believe, it's all a work in progress, but they seem to be happy with that membership. The other thing which did go out to, I think all of you, if you're on the NHSBA, and I'm happy to resend it, was a presentation from Monadnock School Board, which was the School Board of the Year. And I found a lot of the things that they did and initiatives that they had really interesting, and they were also happy to share any of their infrastructure surveys they've developed, all sorts of things for kind of board development work. So if you take a look at that and have anything, that I'm happy to reach out and connect and get some of those resources. Any questions?
Interesting day. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Could you send that? I know I got
the
that.
Monadnock one. Yeah, I'll highlight it.
All of us, and we can look at that.
Just came out on Friday. Was it?
Yeah. It recently came out.
Yeah.
Okay, Zach.
So two things. One, I think I already know the answer to. So you feel like it was what we took in terms of this first step was valuable in terms of our contribution to that conversation. What was your walk away on if we were going to take that to the next step for us? What would that next step be?
I'm glad you asked that question because I completely forgot something important. So one thing that I learned, so we voted on new resolutions in our in our meeting, those 8 ones. We were provided the continuing resolutions, but in order for resolutions to make it into these are the things NHSBA advocates for, continuing resolutions have to be passed 3 times. So that list of resolutions we should have at least discussed and made sure we were in support of all of those. It ended up passing, and I just abstained. I think that I think there's a lot of support in the room around the school lunches and so I hope that was, I think that was heard, and is something that maybe we could provide some advocacy around, or things like that. But I do think that it was I think that when we look legislatively, our first priority needs to be NHSBA, because they have the lobbyists on the ground and they are doing the work. And so I think that we can think about resolutions. I'll try to remind you of this conversation when that time comes in like April, May. And so I think that should probably be the main focus, because it's very strategic, their advocacy for the things they get involved with, and how you determine that is through resolutions. Does that answer your question?
No, totally, and I think it's a smart. It is. You're right. I mean, you have the ability to, as a board here, to influence, lobbyists on the ground on behalf of New Hampshire education in a way that we, as a board, individually cannot do. So, so I think it's a good insight, and it's also, I think hopefully we're not going to lose sight of when that cycle's coming back up again. Not just like what's the date, but like what's our kind of trajectory in terms of trying to think about resolutions we might want to propose.
It was discussed that the call usually goes out in June or July, and so that's when people are at a pause. So boards that have done resolutions often have it as a standing agenda in April to start a discussion, May to sort of finish it up. So we should probably add that to kind of our standard agenda. And yeah, I think they talked about sort of changing the cycle a little bit, but I think it's probably going to be date changes, not.
Yeah.
Carrie, I know they're always looking for board members on the.
They already asked me.
Did you join or what?
I've been practicing saying no. I said no.
Yeah, so keep that in mind, board members, if anybody wants to become a board member. You have to go to Concord, I believe, for the meetings. Well, maybe they do it on Zoom now, too. I don't know.
In person for the full board and remote for the subcommittees, because we passed a resolution about it. Is the only reason I know that.
Do any remote. Oh, boy. Okay, well, thank you, Kerry. We really appreciate you representing us, and it sounds like it was a good day. Okay, do we have any other committee updates? Yes, Ann.
I'm your representative on the Library Board of Trustees, and a number of people have asked about, does our Portsmouth Public Library ban books? And the answer is they do not ban books. But if people want to ban a book, they don't ban it, they challenge it. And in order to challenge it, they have to fill out a report. And as a result of that, they don't challenge. And they don't
We haven't
ban.
had any challenges yet, anyway. So let's hope that doesn't happen.
You got it.
Fascinating.
Brian.
Yeah, on the rec board, there's a couple of things that are going on there. One of the big things that they're looking for community participation in is they're been conducting a rec needs study. So sort of they've been looking at it from the ground up and comparing us to other cities and like how many parks do you have, how accessible are they to people, and how many arenas do you have an ice rink, all those kinds of things. So there's been a couple surveys that have gone out over the last few months, but they are looking to schedule a workshop. That hasn't been time to be determined, but the idea is to talk about a few of these things like ice rink in Portsmouth and additional fields and stuff like that. So I think, I think Todd is going to continue to reach out to Paulette to make sure that that stuff gets channeled into hopefully Parent Square so we can get it out a little bit. Because I think it really does need some public participation in those workshops to make sure we just don't get, whatever it is, the pickleball, craze that's going on, and that's it, which we are supporting quite a bit, by the way. The other actually really cool thing is the assistant, I believe it's assistant mayor, put out a request for disc golf, and the city's gonna pay for it, and we, supported that move. So it's to be determined where it's actually gonna be built, but there's a couple of ideas, but yeah, disc golf. I haven't played it, but it sounds low impact and
Not low impact's good.
And last thing I just wanted to promote is, the rec center is doing a big Halloween, week thing, and you should definitely look on the, if you're curious, look on the recreation department, and anything that we can put out on Parent Square would be helpful. But they have everything from pumpkin decorating to spooky story walk on community campus, Halloween craft night, and then they have culminating a family fun fest that they have where it's touch a truck and games and animals and all that kind of stuff, and that's the 29th. So again, look at the website, all that stuff's on there.
And of course, the Halloween parade is always
And
October 31st.
Halloween parade and Halloween itself.
Yes,
Yep.
actually on it. Trick or treating
Halloween
is October
par- I
30th.
think, yeah, the Halloween parade's the 31st, and, which is the day after, or day after we're trick or treating. I don't know.
Can I
Any
comment
other
to
committee
Brian?
reports? Yes.
Well, I guess I just, I can talk further, obviously, but I know that we obviously have the new community campus fields. They're going to be incorporating those into Lister. I know that they just switched the lights on, had a big thing with the football. My son was there for that, and so that's great. I think that there is some parking needs in that area. It gets a little dicey with kids coming and going right in front of the storage unit there, so I don't know if you guys can address that within your meeting as far as sharing that information. I also guess I was wondering, as you know, when I was younger, a lot of the rec programs taught kids sports, but now it's more privatized or not so much private, but what is the word? I'm sorry.
Club.
Yeah, clubs, sort of. And so they're using they're using the school fields as well as the rec fields. And I guess I was concerned because sometimes, for certain sports like football, you have to have a medic there to run the game per, whoever's running, the NHIA or whatever is coming down from. But I guess I was curious, sometimes I just wonder if there should be if there is training, if people are using our fields, that there has to be some sort of training across the board, because I'm a little bit concerned that our club teams, how effective they are at conveying to all the coaches or conveying to everybody, certain safety standards or whatnot when kid gets hurt or something's happening. I don't know. It's the mom in me, the child protection person in me sort of sees that, and I think maybe is a place for improvement at some point.
So I would say that rec needs study is a lot bigger than I sort of alluded to. It's sort of like their strategic plan, and that's one of the things they're talking about is the policies and how to communication and all the other things that go along with making sure that fields get not overused and how even when rain delays or rain events, how the communication would roll out and how do people know what the rules are. So yeah, it's part of a bigger discussion.
Is there a way that we could help disseminate that more? Zach, could we include that in one of our letters and maybe one of your announcements to also encourage our community further to? Because I feel like a lot of our students are playing sports or club teams or whatnot, and I think there's a lot to be said there.
So I'll just say, as we have, and this has been conversation with people about communication, and I think we talked about this a little bit even at the board retreat level, about the number of flyer requests we get is huge, and right now we're going through the process based on board feedback of scaling. I don't attach any flyers to my stuff, and that was based on board feedback. We have, based on what people would like us to do, we could put out 10 flyers a day from the school department. That's not the school department. So we're still sorting through that a little bit, but I just want to make sure that you're aware there's a choice right now in terms of how we're doing it, which is trying to respond to feedback we received from the board as we were coming in.
Okay.
So, and that's some of those are with clear partners. So we could do stuff from the rec on a every other day basis. There's stuff we could do from Peak on an every other day basis. And then you start to expand out beyond to anybody who would like to have us as a distribution channel for communication. So we're still working through kind of how to do that in a way where it's not the feedback that you receive that you relayed to us that we've heard as well, which is if you're sending me 15 flyers, I'm no longer looking at that stuff. So anyway, so we'll continue to try to be good partners with the rec and try to sort through that communications issue as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any other committee reports? Kerry?
May I just follow up and just say I really appreciate the communication with the video, with the the links and usually like one clear ask or one clear resource. I think that is, like, I engage with them every time personally, and I didn't prior with all of the things. So I completely hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Carrie? Nick?
Student council's gotten up and started. We finally managed to get all the advisors and everyone in line, so we're doing Senate meetings now. I have officially been reelected.
Hey!
School board member, or as a school board representative, not member. Yeah, we're basically ready to go into Spirit Week now as well. We've voted on all the days. We've got preparations in place. The committee's been doing a great job, so yeah, seems like things are going pretty well.
Is that next week, Nick?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you, Nick.
Zach, do we have a policy committee meeting date?
I'm not in a position to give you a date right now.
She
I would think-
canceled it and then hasn't offered a new date.
Okay, I guess in the email it had mentioned that she was going to speak with you, and I know that
Okay.
times
Well,
are tough right now. But
There hasn't been a new, I don't know, there hasn't been a new date set, but I can work on getting a new date set.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to thank the subcommittees that we have going now. We have legislative subcommittee, we have the redistricting subcommittee, and we have the RFP subcommittee. So thank you, board members, for working in addition to what we do regularly on our board. So thank you for the time and effort that you're all putting into making those committees work and making us a more effective board. So thank you. And we look forward to reports from all of you when you're ready. Let us know. So I think we're all set. Do we have anything else that anybody would like to say? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Everybody vote for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Right.